Hello everyone, welcome back to my Frosthaven commentaries. Today we're doing something a bit different. We are going to take a look at the Snowdancer. My Snowdancer in the recent campaign has played a wonderful role to the team, and it is time for the Snowdancer's retirement. So I think this is a pretty good opportunity to stop and take stock of the Snowdancer, and let's take a look at what I think of the Snowdancer on the +3 difficulty playthrough I've been doing. So as usual, we'll start with a preamble. I play pretty much exclusively on insane +3 difficulties, as you can tell. Even in the physical games where I play with my friends, I tend to play on +2 at a minimum, and most of the time it's 4 players. So I'll be judging the characters, therefore using these criterias, i.e. unlike maybe your regular playthrough, there's going to be much more monsters in the 4-player +3 difficulty setting. The monsters tend to hit harder, they tend to have more hit point, therefore the game tends to last more rounds. And some of the usual playstyles you might use in the lower difficulty setting, such as one-shotting a monster in a round, tend not to work so much, because even the weaker enemies, even the imps, tend to have quite a lot of hit points that you might not be able to kill it in one round. The monsters tend to therefore also be immune to more conditions, and they have higher movement value, so something such as like pushing the monsters out in a corner tend not to work so well when the algogs and the wolves are moving 6 hexes per turn anyway. So what does that mean then in terms of how I play? Well, I tend to play primarily to the objective of the scenario, so rather than taking high risk and for higher reward, I tend to play more conservatively whenever there are options, and I tend to use, to the extent possible, all the cards, all the strategies. Maybe you might think they're cheesy, but I tend to use everything I can just to beat the scenario, because the other constraint I have as a middle-aged gamer is I don't have a lot of time to play. So, having said that, I actually think Snowdancer is very uniquely placed in the +3 4-player setting, because the Snowdancer, and let's have a look at the Snowdancer. The Snowdancer has some very unique toolkits to provide a very strong, supportive, defensive type of play to the team. Now, normally on higher difficulties, my guiding philosophy is damage is better than tanking, even though you will need to tank because the monsters tend to just last a lot longer and you will inevitably get hit. Snowdancer in this context, even though Snowdancer doesn't provide a lot of direct damage, the Snowdancer's efficiency in providing defensive and damage mitigation measures is very, very valuable. And that's where I tend to lean into every time I play the Snowdancer on a higher level difficulty. But before we talk about that, let's just have a quick look at the Snowdancer. So, I actually find the player character mat to be slightly misleading as usual, because first of all, the Snowdancer, I tend to think of a Snowdancer less of a snow-associated character, more of a wind-associated character when it comes to the elements. In particular, the way I play the Snowdancer, which we'll talk about in this video, I think the focus on wind on higher level difficulties tends to have a much better payoff than on the ice element. But mind equip, let's look at the class notes. I think the first thing the class note talks about is your access to a variety of persistent bonuses. And yes, we do have many persistent bonuses. Let's take a look at a couple of examples. At level 1, you have access to cold therapy on the bottom half, which grants you at the start of each of your turn, you can either consume ice or wind to perform a heal 2 at range 2. So this is obviously a very, very good ability, and this is one of the first reasons why I think Snowdancer is a very good defensive support character on higher difficulty levels, because unlike most characters who have to take action out to perform healing, Snowdancer has this way of increasing efficiency in the defensive measures they can deploy, such as this, so that you are not actually expending action every single round, you're just getting a passive heal, and this can translate into a lot of healing, and more importantly, a lot of efficient healing, which is what the team needs if the team needs to play defensively. On the other hand, Snowdancer also has cards like this one, top half of Chilling Impact. It says at the start of each of your turn, you can consume ice, and if you do, at the end of each of your force movement abilities, this turn, all enemies moved with ability suffers 1. So in other words, if you take ice, then you move people through push or pull, then people take a damage. And this damage is pure damage because this is suffer damage. Now, I'm gonna start off right off the get-go and say I don't tend to play the Chilling Impact style of Snowdancer on higher level difficulties, simply because I don't think one damage, most often spread between multiple enemies, is that impactful. I think on lower level difficulties there is definitely a justification. So if I take a look at level 7 Algox Priest, you have 34 hit point versus potentially like a level 3 or maybe a level 4 Priest where if we have 14 hit points. 1 hit point in the context of 12 or 14 hit point is quite a lot, is almost 10%, but because the way the monster's HP scales so exponentially as they get into the higher levels, 1 hit point damage in a 27 or 34 hit point context, even with the shield as an added bonus because you can go through the shield with pure damage, doesn't tend to mean very much. Even if you look at someone like the Hound at level 7, a 23 hit point Hound, 1 damage is just not going to really cut it. And because most often your Chilling Impact is also paired with cards such as Enticing Breeze, for example. The bottom half is a good example. You're moving multiple enemies at a given point. Yes, if you moved 3 enemies here, that would translate to 3 damage. But on higher difficulty levels, you really want the team to be focusing down one, often the most dangerous enemy at a time, rather than spreading the damage. And, the fact that you have to deploy this first and then do this damage with ice, there's a lot of conditions here, and the fact that when you do this, most time you're spreading, means Chilling Impact tend not to be my preferred choice of playing Snowdancer at higher levels. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, yes, there are persistent abilities, not all of them are useful, and I would say you probably should be approaching Snowdancer with the mindset that on higher level difficulties, most of the persistent bonuses are more like side quests, because Snowdancer, even as a player might suggest, yes, you have a large hand size, you have hand size of 11, you can definitely perform these persistent bonuses once or more than once each scenario. I actually find that most of Snowdancer's regular actions are fairly efficient, and they're very valuable to a high level team on +3 difficulties. As opposed to needing to play this, even something like Cold Therapy, you have quite a lot of healing, as we will see, just through your regular play, that your team probably do not necessarily need this. Most of the time I find if I'm playing this, it's in a survival type of scenario, but even then often I overheal with Cold Therapy. So yeah, once again, I think probably the first class note is a little bit misleading. This is not something I would emphasize on actually, on higher level difficulties. And I think you can play Snowdancer just as well without playing any lost card, and you be very efficient and very good for the team. Now the next thing I think is definitely worth talking about. Snowdancer has ability to generate hazardous terrains, and hazardous terrains, by pushing enemy, and by enemy I solely mean grounded enemies, because of course flying enemies are not impacted by terrain overlays, you can do pure damage to them. And at level 7, which you'll quickly progress to on +3 difficulty, you will be doing 4 damage. Now this is in fact I think how the real way how Snowdancers should be doing damage. And the hazardous terrain through monster AI movement manipulation can also provide you with a lot of defensive damage mitigation methods, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So I think if you are coming into Snowdancer for the first time and you're looking for some hints and tips, especially on higher difficulties, especially on +4 players or +3 players, I would say the biggest takeaway is actually not to think so much about the persistent bonuses, but actually, in my opinion, to play into Snowdancer's strengths, which is efficient efficient actions, defensive supportive actions, couple that with hazardous terrain generation. On the back of the mat, I don't take this sort of with... I think you got to take this with a bit of a grain of salt. I think complexity value, one, I think is slightly misleading. I think the Snowdancer is actually... I think Snowdancer's cards are not too super complex, but if you are using hazardous terrains in order to provide control and damage mitigation for the team, there's quite a lot to actually think about, and I've seen players who are not interested in that type of thought process and therefore do not end up enjoying the Snowdancer very much. But equally, if you are into that sort of thinking process, and we'll talk about that and give some examples in a bit, you'll absolutely enjoy the Snowdancer. Elemental affinities, like I said, I think maybe Wind Waker would be a better class name for the Snowdancer. I actually find the eyesight of the abilities not too important. Most of the time I'm more focused on generating wind. And then, yeah, Snowdancer, range character, yes. Mobility, yes. Support, yes. Control, yes. Definitely not melee, but I actually think defense, maybe this is meant to be like ability to tank solo. I actually think this Snowdancer brings mostly supportive and defensive abilities to the class, to the party. Now, as usual, I'll be talking about the Snowdancer, and I'll be giving some scores, and my scores are based on, if you haven't seen my other class videos, are based on the primary objectives, the typical primary objectives of the Frosthaven scenarios. So there are killing, so i.e. can you kill a single enemy? Can you kill all enemies, which are typically the Frosthaven scenario objectives? Can you survive for X number of rounds? How good are you at escaping and retreating? Either running from one end of the room to the other, or sometimes going deep into a scenario and coming back to the starting hex. And then finally, how good are you at defending objectives or escorting VIPs from point A to point B? And the scoring will be out of 5. So, let's get into it. What do I think about Snowdancer? And as usual, I'm going to list 3 character traits of people I think who would enjoy playing a Snowdancer. And remember, this is on +3 difficulties. I do acknowledge on the lower difficulty levels, you can absolutely get away with more of a damaging dealer type of Snowdancer. But on +3, I think you got to be absolutely playing to Snowdancer's strength. And Snowdancer's strength, like I said, is the ability to make the team last longer through defensive measures, and I think you absolutely should be playing into that at this level of difficulty. So I think the 3 character traits are supportive, defensive, and positional. So let's delve a little bit into it, what I mean by that. Supportive. So I think unlike the Banner Spear, if you saw my Banner Spear guide, my thought process around the Banner Spear is you really got to be a leader. You know, you got to be coordinating your team on pulling off formations, fighting around the banner, you know, generally giving people directions on what the objective and priority of each round should be. The Snowdancer, on the other hand, I think is the opposite of that. You need to be playing around your team to provide the right support. And especially I find Snowdancer is often one of the first character you unlock. I think the Frosthaven campaign just generally leads you to unlocking Snowflake first most of the time. So I think when I play Snowdancer, I'm ending up joining a team where my other teammates tend to be, you know, level 6 or above, level 5 or above at least, and I'm joining typically at level 2. And there's a junior member of the team where your team probably has quite a well-developed style already. I think most of the time I'm coming in to effectively augment my team's strength and try to cover up my team's weaknesses, and the Snowdancer has a variety of tools at its disposal for doing this. You've already seen some of the healing abilities. There's quite a lot of damage mitigation just through cards that create hazardous terrains. And of course you have a lot of movement manipulation cards such as Crosswinds, where both the top and bottom half, you can see, provides movement to your allies or force movement to your allies or the enemy outside of their turn. So that can be a very good way of setting people up. You have buffs, and you have one of the most important buff, I think, for the Snowdancer, which is ability to apply a ward. Ward is incredibly useful on higher level difficulties because ward effectively halves the enemy's attack. And on higher level difficulties, when the enemies are hitting very hard, like at level 7, the Algoth card hits you for 7 on average, you're mitigating 4 points of damage, as opposed to maybe at level 4 or even level 3, when they're hitting for 5 or 6, you're mitigating 3 points of damage. So 4 and 3 doesn't feel like a lot, I guess. It is just 1 hit point difference. But when even on a level 9 character for Snowdancer, you only have 20 hit point damage. Mitigating those bigger hits, and because they compound, right? So if you're getting hit maybe twice, having that first ward really takes the edge off, because getting hit so much that you lose a card is often how you end the game effectively on higher level difficulties, because you're just going to run out of stamina. And the ward really helps to carry the team for a long way. Which I think naturally translates into the second point, which is a defensive type of character. If you enjoy playing a support and a defensive type of character, you'll very much enjoy playing a Snowdancer. The ward, I think maybe the other thing to talk about the ward is Snowdancer has a very efficient way of applying ward. So unlike the Blink Blade, if you think back to my Blink Blade guide, you have ability at level 2 that applies ward on yourself paired with movement. Whilst that's a very good card, it's not very efficient. I think that's where the Snowdancer really shines, through defensive efficiency. If you're only applying 1 ward at a time every round, an enemy will maybe on average hit the team once or twice every round, you're actually falling quite rapidly behind in that defensive curve. That's when it's almost like it's much better to just kill the enemy rather than prolonging the fight. But the Snowdancer has a very efficient way of applying ward. So even though the Snowdancer we talked about efficiency and healing already, and we're going to see more of that. But if you look at, if you look across Snowdancer's cards, right, there's only really 1 card that applies ward, which is Zephyr Barrier. But Zephyr Barrier is a very efficient way of applying ward, which is what makes Snowdancer very good at damage mitigation through this particular condition. Rather than applying 1 ward at a time, you're applying 2 ward at a time, and you're providing a little bit of healing. So something like this can easily build up if you're doing like a 20 round scenario and you get to play this card 3 or 4 times. You are quickly out defending the damage the enemies can output to the team, and that's when the defensive measure efficiency really kicks in. In addition, Snowdancer has these rolling healing and warding card, which by doing a lot of multi-target attack, which Snowdancer is actually very good at. Not very good at doing damage, but very good at targeting multiple people in 1 round. You can often fish these out, and this is again a very efficient way of applying ward, because this is not taking up an action. And then finally, of course, Winter's Breath, when you short rest, and often when the team is really in trouble, that's when you short rest. Having wind around, which is almost a guarantee, allows you to apply ward. So even though action-wise, Snowdancer can only apply the ward through 1 card, effectively Snowdancer has multiple ways of applying ward. And, unlike a condition like Strengthen, right, you might be strengthening ally but nobody's really attacking, or your initiative is not in the right order for this to really matter, no one will ever reject a ward. And I find that by having Snowdancer on my team, often than not, more than half of my team will be warded up in between rooms. And of course, that's when it's most dangerous. You kick down a door, enemies swarm at you, you end up taking a lot of hit, and that's when having ward on your team really, really helps in that scenario. And in particular, I guess the other thing is, on higher level difficulties, getting hit for 7 is not often the worst thing in the world. Getting hit for 7 twice is not even the worst thing in the world, because you can anticipate that. You see the enemies here, and they're coming to you, right? They're coming to you to hit you, and you can sort of shuffle your team, rearrange positions, split the damage, do whatever to anticipate for that. But I often find what a scenario ending situation is, an enemy critical hits you out of nowhere. You may be anticipating 14 damage, but you're definitely not anticipating 21 damage, for example. And that's why I guess I favor leather armor so much on higher level difficulties, just to avoid that scenario. But ward is effectively another way of doing it, right? If you put ward on your character, even if the enemy draws critical hit, it will still be 7 damage. So you will not get knocked out of the park and lose a card this round by having ward on your characters. And the Frost and Snowdancer is just so good at doing this. Monster movement control we talked about, but the other thing I think to highlight is Snowdancer actually has a lot of control CC abilities in its toolkit. Snowdancer has one of the best easily set up disarm in the game. through Snowblind, you can disarm basically 2 enemies at range 5 with disarm, and the only condition you need is to create a hazardous terrain, and that's not very difficult. You have abilities like, even at level 1, you have modeling abilities. You have immobilize abilities, like through cards bottom half of Biting Frost. Again, you need hazardous terrain, but that's not too difficult. And you have a lot of abilities that pushes enemy away from you, like Surging Blow, where you can push enemy for 4 hexes. You have cards like Lifting Gust. Again, you can push enemy for 4 hexes. These kind of act as a soft disarm. I mean, it doesn't really work against someone like Algok's Guard or a Wolf, for example, that's moving at 6 hexes a turn. But against somebody who moves maybe a bit slower, like the Archer, who moves 2, even though they're ranged, you know, pushing them 4 hexes away sometimes acts as a disarm. And through things like that, you have a lot of indirect way of mitigating damage as well. Finally, positional. I think this is actually quite important. I think a lot of people are completely fine playing a supportive and defensive type of character. They might miss throwing out big damages like Blink Blade, but you know, it is satisfying to support a team by doing buffs and healing and whatnot. But some people I find really do not like the positional aspect of Snowdancer, and I think for Snowdancer to be successful on a higher level, you absolutely have to play around with hazardous terrain. Avoiding it would take away a huge chunk, not only of the flavor of the character, but also the efficiency and the strength of the character on this level of difficulty, and some people just don't enjoy it. Hazard generation really requires you to have some positional awareness, and I don't just mean that, hey, I need to think about where to put it. In fact, I think Snowdancer is one of the characters with the least amount of thinking required in terms of where to put it, because generally you can put hazardous terrain out. I mean, let's look at this level 1 card, Frigid Growth. Top half says, create 1 hex hazardous terrain tile in a featureless hex within range 3. So not only this is a ranged hex placement, you can also put it down in featureless, which means that you can put it down on top of enemy, because that's featureless. You can put it down on yourself, that's featureless. You can put it down on your ally, that's also featureless. Featureless just means there can't be any terrain overlay, so there can't be any trap or difficult terrain obstacle here. But otherwise, you know, you can place them on top of anybody. It doesn't trigger any damage, but it does mean it's very, compared to maybe like a trap character or even Meteor, it's very easy for you to place down these hazardous terrain. So the positional awareness is not really about where to place them, because that's kind of easy. It's more about where to place them in order to get the maximum efficiency. You need to understand monster logic, you need to understand your team's priority. Like for example, if you have a Blink Blade or a maybe Bone Shaper is a better example, where they need to be in a certain position at a certain time, you closing those positions down for them might be catastrophic for their output and efficiency. So you need to communicate with your team whenever you want to place a hazard terrain down in order to get the best out of the situation. And some people just don't enjoy those chatter. You know, I've seen players who really enjoy playing sort of a more introvert style of play where you don't need to talk too much, you just execute, you know, actions. In 4 players, that's already a challenge, and if you are that type of player and you need to be putting on ice spikes in order to create situations and output for your team, and you're not talking to people, you can find those actions quickly translate into nothing. And I've definitely seen that, and it's a downer for people. So I guess in terms of that, you need to really understand the team's priorities, the team's initiatives, the monster's priorities and initiatives and logic. And that's a lot to take in for a new player. I guess that's why Snowdancer is a locked class. But equally, you know, if you do understand those things and you can use them to your advantages, you'll really, really enjoy Snowdancer. So maybe this is a good segue to talk a little bit about hazard placement and what that generally looks like. Obviously, there is a lot of very simple things you can do, like you can create a hazard like this to make this monster, you know, have to walk around you rather than walk in front of you. I think those things are fairly straightforward. I'm not going to talk too much about it. Obviously, you can also close off a room like this. I think that's, again, very easy to know. And then the monsters that will come towards you, they will take damage. So I'm not really focused on talking about basic examples of how to place hazards. I more want to talk about the combo the Snowdancer has, and the fact that Snowdancer is actually very good at creating a 3-hex hazardous terrain tiles situation in one round. I think that's quite unique because, you know, I'm not going to talk too much about unlock classes, but you have unlock classes who's very good at creating, like, you know, a lot of hazard terrains in a line very quickly, or maybe putting down traps, you know, around you with some flexibility. What Snowdancer really excels at is creating this 3-hex hazardous terrain situation in adjacent hexes in one round, and Snowdancer has basically the option of either going really, really fast on Initiative 17 through a level 5 card, or on Initiative 86, which is very, very slow, through this level 3 card. And these two cards being one on the bottom, which says move 3, create a hex hazardous terrain in adjacent featureless hex. And then this cold snap top half says create 2 1-hex hazardous terrain tiles in adjacent featureless hexes, and then 3 enemies take 2 damage. Because one of them's a top action, one of them's a bottom action, these two cards are often played in conjunction in the same round, and you can pick and choose. You can say, I want to go really fast, or I can go really slow. A very good example might be, you know, you spawn me a corridor room with some, you know, Algox guards, right? And you start here, and you're like, well, they're coming towards me. What do I want to do? You can either think, you know, hey, maybe they're really far back. I'm going to just move these guys out of the way for now, even though I set them up for some examples. You know, they could be very far back, right? So you might be like, you know what? I can choose to go really, really slow. So I go Initiative 86. You know, they might move like a bit towards you. And now you can go forward. You can drop, because it's featureless, you can drop straight on top of them. Maybe you can do something like this. And you can cold snap them for immediate 2 damage gain now. Right? So you've done 4 damage, and next turn you can go really fast and retreat, and maybe push them back out. So, you know, a good example might be like, you know, they come towards you like this. You move forward, you cold snap like this. You do 4 damage to them. Next turn you go really fast, and maybe you play some cards like Lifting Gust at level 1 is a good example, or maybe like Surging Below at level 8. You can push them. You can push these guys back out. So on their round, they'll have to move forward again. Then they may not even reach you, and they have to take another 4 damage as they move through this. And you can push them back out again, hopefully with something, or your team can do that, and they'll take another 4 damage as they get pushed back out. And now they have to come back in again before they can even hit you. And you can see through that process, right, they've now taken... I mean, not only have you mitigated a lot of damage for your team by just pushing them constantly back out, but by moving back and forth through this, they've already taken themselves, what is this, 14 damage, right? Just by moving back and back forth and back in and out of these 3-hex terrains. And that's a very common strategy I deploy on a higher level Snowdancer to, I mean, this is jumping ahead a little bit, to do damage, but also more importantly to create abilities and potentials to do damage. I often think of these this triple hex ice spike terrain as potential damage. It's almost like within each of these I've saved up a 4 damage attack that's ready to go, and by repeatedly utilizing them, by setting them up, I'm not doing any damage, but by setting them up, I allow the team and myself to repeatedly utilize these and to do damage to the enemy. And the other situation I think is very common why I play the Snowdancer is, again, you have Algox in the corridor, and rather than, like I said, closing up the room like before, you can maybe do something like this. So instead of closing up, you create a little potential tile for them to get to, so then that rather than just walking through here and hit you, which they will take damage, yes, but in this situation, you know, they will go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and not be able to reach you, right? And this guy go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and again, because of the initiative on the enemies, this guy's effectively lost the movement, which is really good. You can imagine that if there's more people here, they might move at slightly different speed, and they might just all get stuck here. So they're forming like a conga line, and by doing this, you've mitigated 1 round of complete damage versus, you know, if you are just, I don't know, a bling blade to someone, yes, you're going to do damage, but your entire team will be taking hits without these 3-hex terrains. And with the 3-hex terrain adjacent tiles, you have a lot of flexibility to create situations like this. And next turn, you can even like just move through here and get to the other side. Now they have to come and chase you and you might only get attacked by one Algoxes rather than, you know, both in this situation. So yeah, this is a very quick example. We'll do more examples in a little bit, but this is a very quick example to demonstrate what I mean by positional awareness. And this might seem straightforward to somebody who's played a lot of Frosthaven, but I do think if you come into Snowdancer for the first time and you're facing higher level difficulties, you might sometimes not quite sure on how to place these to be efficient, and this is a very good starter guide. Okay, so we talked about the characteristics. To summarize, Snowdancer, I think on higher level difficulty, really is a support character, and more than anything else, it's a defensive type of character. And yeah, play with your hazards and find ways to make them efficient. Okay, scoring. Let's look at scoring. So for kill, I give Snowdancer 3. 3 maybe a little bit, I suppose, maybe a little bit harsh, but I think the way to think about Snowdancer is essentially a lot of the time you are not doing direct damage. So if we think about direct damage, I mean by playing your attacks and then getting a huge bonus from your attack modifier deck. That's what I mean by direct damage. And while Snowdancer's attacks not necessarily bad, they're definitely, you know, you have quite a few attack like 3, so like Enticing Breeze with wind power is attack 3, Cold Therapy is attack 3. So these are, you have AoE attacks, that's a Lost, that's potentially attack 4. This is also attack 3. So you have quite a lot of fairly average attacks, I guess. It's not like a Drifter that's doing attack 5 right off the get-go, but you can do some attacks for sure. And as you level up, your attacks tend to stay within the 1 to 4 range. So you get cards like Whipping Gale, that's attack 1. But then you also get cards like Surging Below, that's attack 3, attack 3. You have cards like Snowblind, attack 3. And then some of your lost cards. Then maybe this is a good one. Like the bottom half of this gives you attack 5, 2 targets. So you do have cards that do attacks, but mostly if you're not playing lost cards, your attack is somewhere between attack 1 to attack 4. I say attack 4 because if we take a look at your attack modifier deck, you basically take out all the -1s for 0, and then you take out some 0 for 0 rolling, some 0 for +1, you can add some +1. So mostly you're going to be drawing somewhere between a 0 to a +1. So most of your attacks are going to be somewhere in the range of, if you imagine you're attacking for mostly like 1 to 3, you're going to be doing 2 to 4 average or 1 to 4 average. So the damage range for Snowdancer is not super exciting because most people, you know, when Blinkblade does attack 2, that's more often than not attack 4 or attack 5. You're not going to see that because your rolling modifiers are doing damage based on position, not necessarily doing direct damage. So you're expecting to do somewhere between 1 to 4 damage each time you draw your attack modifier and do attack. And that's not very impressive. That quickly drops off on +3 difficulties. However, your damage does come from these ice spikes, and if you can set them up correctly, you can do a lot of damage, as I've shown here. But remember, this doesn't apply to flying enemies, and it does need setup, right? And these things don't move with you, so if you go into a new room, you have to set up again. So that's why I've really given Snowdancer a 3 out of 5 on damage. Yeah, maybe this is a good time to talk a little bit about doing damage, like how do you maximize doing damage. So again, we're gonna think very strictly in the situation I talked about, where you can easily create like a 3-hex situation. So if you're not interested in like closing off the room or manipulating logic, especially maybe in a very narrow room where it's not possible to easily manipulate logic, and maybe the monsters are just moving too fast in terms of speed and initiative for you to really do that. So what do you do here? And I find you basically have 2 ways with 3-hex to do most damage in combination with your team. And that is, you can create a triangle shape or you can create a line shape. And of course, any characters with any push and pull will appreciate this, because by doing this, you create a lot of space and room for doing damage, right? Because simply dragging someone like this will do 8 damage to them, and then pushing them out will do another 4. So I like to call this the push and pull combo. Many characters on your team have this. Bannerspear has it. Bannerspear has push and pull with things like Javelin and Unbreakable Wall. Deathwalker has some of the best, best versatile pulling in the game. Many characters will have some kind of force movement ability, and you creating this and your team sitting behind it to fight the enemy, right? You can take them in, push them out, then have to come in again. Then they're taking like, let's say like get pulled into here. That's 8, pushed out, takes another 4. That's 12. Then they have to come back in to do another 4 to themselves. Quickly, you're doing 16 damage in like 2 rounds with a little bit of help from the team. But if your team is not willing to help, maybe your team has a drifter who doesn't really do a lot of push and pulling, you can actually set up those combos yourself, and this is what I like to call the push and pull combo. My favorite push and pull combo is using Whipping Gale. Top half, attack 1, target 3 at range 4, pull 2, right? So if you set something up like this already, you can even sit behind your team, right? You can have like a banner spear standing in front, tanking damages and facing up against incoming enemies. Because this is a range 4 attack, you can pull enemy in very easily, even if you're standing just 1 hex behind your tank, which is often where you might find yourself. So this one you can like drag this guy in, do 1 damage, do another 4 damage because of the hazard. Here you can do 1 damage from the attack, let's say, and then do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 damage. So here you've done like 9 damage, here you've done 5 damage. So already you've done 14 damage, and these guys got retaliate. Or they might have shield, right? And pushing them and pulling them onto these spike terrains completely ignores that. So you can see here, you have quite a lot of damage potential, and then you can do something like bottom half of Chilling Impact or Blizzard, which allows you to move and then push another enemy out for 2. So you can maybe push this guy out, and he'll take another 1, 2, 3, 4. And now, to attack you, he has to come back in. And he has to take another 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 damage. You can see already, without doing any real meaningful attack, you've already done so much damage to these enemies, and they have retaliate. Someone like a Banner Spear or Bling Blade might find it difficult to approach them, but you, with the help of your spikes, if you set them up correctly, you do not care. Alternatively, you can try to set something up like this. This is what I call it like a line situation. This will be much appreciated by character who also has a very long-ranged, long hex pulling or pushing abilities. Monster starting classes, I think Bling Blade has one at level 1 called Kinetic Transfer that has this type of, can take advantage of this type of 3 hex, because of course 2 hex, the most you can do is like 2 hex pulling, but with the 3 hex, again, I'm talking about 3 hexes strictly because it's very easy for you to set up 3 hex. You can imagine first round you come here late, do this, and you can move away next round and open this space up for some shenanigans. So yeah, any character with any type of long pushing or pulling abilities will appreciate this type of situation that you set up. I find this is more common. This is very easy to set up because first round you can just go here, do this, and you can move back. Remember, adjacent featureless terrain counts the terrain you're standing on because this hex is adjacent to you. But here, it's also very helpful, especially you also have cards allow you to set up this combo yourself. So a good example is Crosswind, bottom half. You can put an ally or enemy within range 4 for 3. So in this case, right, you can be very long way away from the enemy. You can still drag them through all 3 of these. So you can go like 1, 2, 3. And then this will do 4, 8, 12 damage. So let's say this guy was just full HP. You can quickly do quite a lot of damage to it very, very quickly. And then you can combine with Lifting Gust, attack 1. So let's say you do another 1 damage from the attack. You now get to push this guy for 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And you've done another 8 damage. So you can see this guy is almost dead in 1 round by simply doing some combo like this. And yeah, work with your team. Often your team will have some kind of push and pulling ability. So what you really want to say, hey guys, can you maybe pull them in? Then I can maybe push them out. Or maybe I can pull them in and you can push them out. And if you stack your initiative one after the other, the enemies don't really even get a chance to move or do anything, do any attacks more crucially, before this happens, and now they have to come back in and take damage themselves. And you'll find you can melt quite a lot of these more problematic grounded enemies very quickly, but unfortunately this strategy does not work for for flying enemies. So this is why I've given 3 score for Snowdancer. I do know, like I said, Snowdancer has ability to do something like Chilling Impact, which also does damage I just don't think, like I said, it's very effective. I find it's more effective to do this most of the time. And if there are flying enemies, there are other things you could do, like disarming them, immobilizing them, etc. And just leave your team to it, because flying enemies tend not to be shielded like imps, and they tend not to have a lot of hit points. You can melt them relatively quickly, and if they are very heavily shielded enemies like the living spirits, they tend not to have a lot of HP, and presumably your team will have high pierce attacks. And again, I guess this comes back to what kind of team you're playing with. If you're playing with a team of people who are really, and I struggle to find what team composition that might be, because most of the characters in Frosthaven have indirect or direct damage. Snowdancer, I think, is probably the only character I can really think of that's not very focused on doing direct damage. So yeah, I struggle to think what team composition you're playing there, especially playing 4 players. There's got to be at least 2 characters that's very focused on doing damage or very good at doing damage. And you can just play support to them if you're faced up against enemy time that you're not good at doing damage using this. And you can grant people attacks, right? You don't have to do the bottom half of Crosswind. You can give the top half grant an ally move 2 and attack 3. If they're really good at piercing shields, inflicting wound, poison, whatever that might be, let them do the attack rather than yourself. So maybe 3 is a bit harsh for scoring, but I think sometimes Snowdancer can do quite a lot of damage, but it does require you to set up. It does require you to work with your team. It's not difficult to set up in terms of cards. I think it's just difficult to set up in terms of finding the right space, finding the right hexes, and finding the right position with your ally. So that's why I've given a 3 to Snowdancer on doing damage. And probably worth mentioning, a lot of the bosses behave very differently. Some bosses are very susceptible to this type of indirect damage, whilst others, there are bosses that's immune to force movement, for example, then this type of strategy will do nothing. So again, I think that essentially forces me to put Snowdancer at 3 rather than any higher. What about defense? In scenarios where you have to survive, I think Snowdancer really shines, and I'm going to give Snowdancer a 4. The only reason I'm giving 4, not 5, is because Snowdancer does not have self-tanking abilities. You have a lot of cards, like I think we talked about Ward already, we talked a little bit about healing. There are some very efficient healing like Snowball, heal 2, range 3, regenerate. Some very fast healing like White Winds, heal 2, range 2. If an ally was healed, you can move them as well, potentially moving them out of danger. Of course, we talked about Zephyr Barrier here, one of my favorite healing card here. You also have lots of like multi-target attack that kind of disguises as healing, because you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cards, 2 of which are rolling. Healing cards in your not very big attack modifier deck. You have 26 cards, of which 6 are rolling, so effective deck size is only 20, which is your starting size effectively. And the fact that you have 5 healing out here is about, it's about 20% chance that you're gonna get a healing out of here. So if your ally has poison on, has wound on, needs a little bit of a quick top up, sometimes if you don't have any healing card handy, you can just do a big attack like Storm War, try to catch 4 or 5 enemies in it, or you can do something like Whipping Gale. I often use Whipping Gale more than just as a forced movement card. I use it basically to actively fish out healing, and if you have any kind of advantage already, you can draw 6 cards out of your 26 deck, and it's very likely you'll hit one of these, and you can remove that pesky poison or wound from your ally and top them up a little bit to keep them going. You also have a lot of good bottom healing, which is very useful, because of course you want to save your top card for manipulating enemies, disarming enemies, whatnot. But like cards like White Wind allows you to do a bottom heal. Whiteout, move 3, heal 2, range 1. That gets you pretty much anywhere to heal your ally. Like Cold Snap, bottom half is a heal. Surging Below, bottom half is also another heal. Range 3, like heal 3. You have a lot of ways of doing both a bottom healing, and if you really need to do a top healing, and if you really need to do healing at the start of your turn. So you can very quickly top up someone from, almost dying through a combination of attacks, bottom healing, top healing, and efficient persistent healing. to get your team to continue to survive. And that really shines through in a scenario where you have to survive multiple rounds until the end. Snowdancer is very, very good at that. We talked about damage mitigation already through ward. I'm not going to repeat it. Indirect damage mitigations we talked a little bit about, right? You have disarm, you have immobilize, you have these hazards you can manipulate to stop the monsters from coming in. And maybe this is another good example to show off, right? You have 6 scary Algox coming at you with a combination of local terrain, right? You can sort of maybe first turn come here, create some hazardous, next turn come here and create some hazardous, or maybe you create these 2 first, then next turn you come here and create this. Then now the monster is going to have to walk all the way around here. So even with a move 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, they're not going to reach you, and they're all going to just end up forming a queue outside of here, right? Eventually. So you can see already, you know, without these, you're going to be hit. But with these, you quickly form like a conga line for an enemy, and you mitigate a lot of damage by doing this. And then, right, in the following turn, right, they might be engaging your friend, Banner Spear, or if you are so inclined, you could actually tell the Banner Spear, look, I'm just going to step over here, and you can step into here. And now the effective surface area for attack for the Banner Spear is only the 2. And then now these guys have to come over and chase you. And, you know, maybe one of them gets to attack you, but the rest of them don't, because they just end up forming, once again, a conga line here. So you can see, in a very simple example, I mean, this isn't realistic. Of course, you're not going to survive this for long. But you can see there's a lot of way to mitigate a lot of damage very quickly, just through a simple placement of 3 terrain hexes. This is another type of common survival scenario I find on a 4-player, right? You are just basically holed up in a corner of the room. Maybe you're against infinite spawns, those infamous infinite spawn scenarios, and you just have to hold out. And what do you do here? You can just wall yourself in. This sounds crazy, but if you have like very tanky characters, very frontline characters like Drifter, Banner Spear, or whatnot on your team, you don't, especially if you are joining in the game at level 2, you don't want to be the focus, right? You don't want to get killed. It's much better for you to stay alive long enough for you to consistently use cold therapy, consistently use snowball and white winds and whiteout to provide those healings. So what do? Hey, just wall yourself off in the corner, and that's fine. And the monsters will then naturally, they'll naturally come down towards your frontline teams, and they will congregate like this. And by doing this, you basically end up in this scenario, and this is more often than not a quite efficient way for your team to survive, because your healing tend to be range 2 and range 3, so you can still reach at least most of your team here, and you yourself are not in danger. And then once in a while, you can drag them in to do some damage and then push them back out. So again, maybe this is too much positional talk, but yeah, I want to showcase that, hey, your defensive ability is not just healing and ward. You have all the other ways of indirect damage mitigation. And of course, you also have perks. Blinding Flurry is probably one of the craziest perk. It just applies muddle to everybody when you open a door or when you start a scenario, which again is often, I think, the most dangerous moment in high difficulty Frosthaven play, because that first door could represent a lot of potential damage. But this, this doesn't avoid it completely, but it definitely softens it a little bit. If you have characters that apply curses in your party, you really want to encourage them to apply as many curses as possible. I mean, one strategy I often do with Deathwalker with the level 9 card Black Lance is, before I open a door, I try to apply as many curses as possible. And then when I open door with Blinding Flurries, hopefully that muddle and the curses combine to mitigate a lot of damage, so my team has chance to set up and do what they want to do in the first room to have a good start. But one thing I do say about Blinding Flurry is, I often forget that perk exists. Somebody actually told me recently, it's actually better to make copies of these when you play, or if you're playing a physical game, actually take this perk card and literally put them on top of a new room that you haven't opened yet, so that you will remember to do this when you do open the door. And I found that to be a very good tip, because normally when I'm playing digital, I just leave it here and I tend to basically forget that this thing ever existed. And it kind of sucks because it is a 3-tick perk, so you really, 2-tick perk, so you really want to make the most of it if you have this perk, and it's a very good perk for damage mitigation. So for it is, Would have given it 5, but for the lack of self-tank. Which may be more relevant in a 2-player game, but 4-player game, I find that's not really a drawback. Okay, let's talk about movement. If you need to run from one place to another, Snowdancer does a pretty decent job, I find. Starting from level 1, you have loads of move 3s, like this, like this. You also have like this. You also have a decent amount of move 2s with jump, like this, and like this. So you're not definitely lacking in movement. Unless you level up, you grab more move 4s if you wish. You got move 3s with jump. You got move 4s with jump. You got move 6. So I don't think you'll ever feel like you're gonna be lacking in movement as a Snowdancer. You have basically somewhere between 3 and 4 as an average non-loss with jump as your movement, and that tends to be enough most of the time. Because you're fairly static in playstyle anyway. Once you set these things up, most you're gonna be doing is moving around to push people back and forth. Most of the time, like I said, you stand in a corner, you stand behind your banner spear or your drifter, so you're the second line or the first line, and you don't have many cards that requires position. A lot of your attacks are basically range 3 or range 4, so you have quite a lot of flexibilities, and in that sense, move 3, move 4 with jump tends to get you to where you need to go. If it is like once you clean the room to follow up, or if you need to escape from one side to the other, like a couple of move 3s, move 4 with jump, with the benefit of maybe a booting item to give you extra +1 move in that particular rest cycle is enough, I find, to get you where you need to be. It's not exceptional, but it's decent. But I do want to mention, you do have a card select 1 called Lifting Gust with a move 8 jump loss with an EXP. This is really why I give 4 to the Snowdancer, because in those rare situations where you do need to get back to your starting room, for example, or you do need to get out very, very quickly and you are going to be the rear guard, Lifting Gust will basically get you where you need to go. The initiative can be a hindrance, because if you get immobilized before 27, then you're kind of screwed. But most often, this does the job. With a little bit of distancing from the enemy, most of the time you rely on your solid move 3s and move 4s. And in a worst case scenario, we can do a move 8 jump. I'll just give a special mention to Blinding Vortex here, bottom half. And maybe I'll also give a special mention to Birdie and Tempest. I mean, we'll talk about Birdie and Tempest separately, of course. The reason I want to give a special mention to Blinding Vortex is because most often you're setting up hazardous terrains. You might be, doing something like this. You set this up, do a lot of damage, killing using it, and now the room is clean. And how do you get past it without taking damage yourself? I mean, one way would be to just pull ward on yourself and take 2 damage as you cross through this. But the other way is you have Blinding Vortex, so you can jump through it. And you have Birdie and Tempest, which grants your allies jump as well and +2 move. So in one round you can use Birdie and Tempest, so now all your allies can jump over these hexes that you've created and move on to the next room. And the next round you can then jump through yourself and catch up with the team and move on to the next room. So I think these 2 cards, sometimes you put these things down, and a Bone Shaper I think is a really good example. Bone Shaper's skeletons and summons gets really annoyed because they can't get through here. Well, Birdie and Tempest is basically a solution card here for your team and for your team's dumb summons to get past the obstacles you've created. Okay, so finally, Escort. No doubt here, Snowdancer is one of the best escorter in Frosthaven, hands down. Birdie and Tempest is basically the reason why. Bottom half of Birdie and Tempest says move 3. Then all your allies gets move 2 and jump to their move abilities this round. If you are ever in a situation where you need to escort a stupid VIP to one side of the room and they're having trouble, this is your solution. There are many, many scenarios in Frosthaven, so much so that I feel even sad giving up my Snowdancer in my latest YouTube campaign, because Birdie and Tempest just makes many scenarios on +3 that much easier because of the bottom ability. And because this applies to this round, not this turn or their turn, you can combo it with cards like Crosswind on your round to give the ally a move 4 effectively with Birdie and Tempest, And then the ally themselves can move 4, right? If they move 2 as default on their turn, assuming you've gone before them with Burst Tempest initiative, and often you can. That will basically be meaning that you can move the ally for 4, and then they can move for 4. And if you have like a banner spear on your team that can also move them for another 2, that becomes a move 4. So all of a sudden your dumb allies is moving 2 hexes at a time, is now moving 12 hexes. And that can trivialize some scenarios very easily. Not only you can boost their movement and do out of turn movement for them, you can also do force movement that can move your allies. So cards like, I shouldn't be moving these. Cards like Crosswind is a very good example. Bottom half of that allows you to pull an ally towards you. This doesn't get benefit from Burst Tempest, but it does mean out of turn you can move your ally out of danger, for example. You have other cards like White Wind, where you can heal them and then move them for 2. Again, very good at pulling out the VIP out of danger if they're ever in danger. And it's also worth mentioning that, of course, you have heal and buff that we've talked about. And I think maybe this is a good moment to also talk a little bit about the allies you can summon. So I've put them out here. You can summon owls, you can summon these cuddly snow fox, and you can summon the polar cat. And I know online there's a guide where you basically play, I can't remember the exact name, Snow Mother or something, or Snow Shepherd guide, that you play to the strength of your summons, because you can use these cards to manipulate your summons. You know, you can drag them out of danger, you can grant them extra attacks, you can give them ward and strengthen. I think again that's probably a very low, how should I say, a low difficulty level Snowdancer build, because these summons, while they are good, especially the polar cat, 2 damage, pierce 3 wound is, you know, it's nothing to sniff at. It's nothing to ignore. But I find these guys just don't survive long enough. Even the cuddly snow fox, which at level 1 has an inbuilt what's it called? The fleece cloak in it, where basically it's initiative 99 for the purpose of initiative ordering, so it tends not to be targeted by melee monsters like Algox Guard as long as somebody else is next to them, which is often the case in 4-player. I just find that even at 5 hit point on level 7, they just tend not to survive a single hit from any monsters. So you're basically saying, look, I'm going to put them out in the hope that they survive 1 hit. In the hope that they don't get ever hit, and they will just like continue to do damage. And yes, the damage is good because you can drag out these healings. So I do find that when you do have an ally out, you tend to end up healing a lot more as a result. But you know, they're not really taking advantage of these cards where, you know, force target movement suffers. Rolling cards, your guys never gonna do any push and pull to the monsters. And yes, getting these things out is kind of helpful, but overall I find they're just more risk than it's worth, because doing something like this, is it better than doing something like, you know, code therapy, for example? I don't think so. I actually just find that is much better for the Snowdancer to ignore the summons at higher difficulty levels and save themselves the headaches and focus on supporting the team. And on top of that, there's so many multi-target monsters that makes these guys really in danger. They're not bad, don't get me wrong. They're just not good enough, I find. And the risk is often not really worth the reward. Like I said, I tend to play more conservatively. So yeah, I tend to say Snow Shepherd's not my type of build for a +3 4-player difficulty level. Sometimes, and they're rare, some scenarios I find the Snow Fox, if anything, is more useful because of that innate inbuilt defensive initiative mechanism. The Polar Cat I find is just, you know, hey, at level 6, first of all, there are better cards I prefer to take at level 6, and then even at level 6, even for bottom summon, which I appreciate means you can do a top action as well on the turn you set this up, I just find it's often not really worth the reward. And I guess the other thing with summon is it kind of plays counterintuitively against your Ice Spike build, because sometimes you want to ward off an area like this, and you don't want to do that then if you have a summon like the polar cats, because then your polar cat, after killing the enemy, will just end up stepping on this and taking 4 at a time, which is not good. If anything, that kind of tells you the flying owl should be your summon of go-to choice because they get to fly, but the problem is they are competing against the bottom half of Burst Tempest, which is often why you pick this card in the first place. So again, if this was maybe here, I might consider summoning the owls as an action because they basically ignore this while the enemies do not. But unfortunately, most of the time I prefer to play the movement card on Burst Tempest. So yeah, there it is. Okay, so I've been talking for an hour now. I'm going to take a quick break. Here's the scoring for Snowdancer. 3, 4, 4, 5. Very good supportive defensive character, like I said. Very good at building up the team for surviving or retreating or running away with a VIP. Your killing criteria is a bit of an on and off. Sometimes you do a lot of damage, sometimes you don't. So I'll take a short break and I'll come back. I'll talk about the level 1 and level 2 plus cards. See you soon. Let's now have a look at the cards. Let's get into the meat of this analysis. So, I think firstly at level 1, there are 3 cards. I think essentially I find I'm often taking it all the way through up till level 9. You know, if you think about it, from level 1 to level 9, you pick up basically 8 additional cards and you have 11 card hand size. So typically these 3 are always featured somewhere in my hand all the way up to level 9. I think they're quite essential. And I'm going to caveat, as I said in the first half of the video, I don't think Snowdancer is a good damage dealer in the traditional sense, and I certainly do not recommend anybody to play the Chilling Impact build on higher difficulty level. Actually, nor do I think it's that good of an idea to consistently play these lost cards like the top half of White Winds. Again, I know people's opinions differ on this, so certainly take what I say with a pinch of salt, but I like to lean into the strength of the class rather than play it across the board, if that makes sense. You know, I find that Snowdancer is not, you know, the attack modifier deck is not conducive to doing massive amount of concentrated damage. I don't, like I said in the first half of the video, I don't enjoy spreading my damage between multiple targets, especially on these hard level difficulty where the monsters hit hard and they have a lot of hit points. I find spreading your damage too thin can result in additional damage taken by the party. And then finally, I just don't find Chilling Impact that useful of a top half. You know, not only is it taking up a valuable top half action right off the get-go, you are also consuming ice, which is not hard to set up, but certainly I find wind is easier to set up than ice most of the time, and the payoff is what exactly? You just do, you know, 1 damage basically when you make people have moved. I find that 1 damage doesn't often come into play so much. You can see from this example already, just force movement already does massive amount of damage if you have set up the ice spike correctly. I guess there's an argument to say, hey, what if you're fighting against flying shielded enemies like Living Spirit, where yes, in those senses, in those situations, 1 damage does make a difference, but in a 4-player party, I think many other classes can fill that role much better than you do. Of course, if you are somehow ending up in a party where nobody wants to do damage, I question how you're surviving a +3 difficulty. But if that's the case, certainly by all means, be the damage dealer of the party. But like I said, I think Snowdancer just fits the defensive supportive role much, much better. Therefore, in this next section, unlike some of my other class videos where I talk about potential builds either way that I think are viable, I just don't think damage dealing is that viable on +3, and I would rather focus the rest of this analysis on the defensive supportive cards that I like to play as a Snowdancer. So starting with White Winds, there are not many not many low initiative cards lower than single digit. I don't think there's any actually until much later in the Endless White, which debatable whether you want to take that or not. So White Winds naturally come into your hand purely because of initiative. As a supportive defensive character, right, sometimes it's very important you put the ward onto your team before they take the hit. You know, you want to mitigate, disarm, immobilize, muddle, damages, whatever. Sometimes you want to do that very, very quickly, and White Winds basically guarantees you there. 11 doesn't beat some of the more annoying Hans card, but most of the time it will do the job. And of course, if you do have initiative boots as part of your equipment setup, this effectively becomes initiative 1, which is very valuable. So White Wind on its own, just the initiative comes in very handy here. The top half, as I said, is an interesting snaking attacking pattern, which you know, can be a bit confusing. But the good thing is, I don't often play this because even with the wind added, you know, you're probably targeting maybe like 3 enemies most of the time with this. And yes, at level 1 with the wind powered, 3 times 4, 12 damage with a push, maybe pushing it to like 16, 20 damage if you're pushing them into hazardous terrain is really, really good. It's just I find most of the time it's not needed for me to do this, and when I do decide to do this, hoping for a big blowout, like I said, my attack modifier deck, even though it's consistent, it doesn't necessarily contribute to doing a lot of damage because there isn't any like rolling +2, rolling +1s like some of the other damage dealing class. So overall, I don't find that I want to play the top half of White Winds most of the time. Maybe that's just me. But you know, if you do want to crack it once in a while to see what happens, do some damage, it's not a bad idea. It's just, I guess, why would you want to do this when you can just simply do some of the push and pull combo like I showed earlier and do massive damage to the grounded enemies? Had this thing had Pierce on it, I would have been much more inclined to play this against the flying shielded annoying enemies that I can't otherwise deal with through spike terrain, but it does not. But the good news about the White Winds is the bottom half is very, very good. You already have many healing abilities in your toolkit, so a bottom heal is just that much more welcomed because you can stack, you know, potentially two healing actions together, like White Wind with Snowball top, White Winds with Zephyr Barrier top. That allows you to top up a single target within range 2 relatively quickly. In addition, if you're healing allies, you can also move them. The movement at initiative 11 can set your allies up for certain attacks, a banner spear formation for example. You know, Bling Blade, maybe Bling Blade has already attacked, going fast, and you're now just pulling the Bling Blade back out. You'll find that your allies will ask you for this ability more often than not. But like I said in the first half, just because you can doesn't mean you should, so you should be circumspect about how you use White Winds. A lot of the time I'm saving White Wind for that, hey, I really need to beat initiative this round because enemy has drawn in a certain way. I'm anticipating a fast initiative card out of enemy that could be very impactful. That's typically when I deploy White Winds. And of course, you don't have to heal an ally, you can also just heal yourself, which is also pretty good. So White Wind, definitely a top favorite card for me in the level 1 card set. And it will travel with you all the way till level 9. And I think, you know, in my Deathwalker guide, one of the viewer asked me about enhancement option. I've avoided talking about enhancement because I thought maybe that's a little bit of a spoiler. Not everyone wants to hear about it. But if you are looking at enhancement, I think the bottom half of White Wind, it's a square, so we can only put a +1 here. Just a +1 range is amazing. But a +1 heal, I can certainly see the value of that. Lifting Gust is another very good card. I think I talked about the bottom half already. A move 8 jump, 1 experience loss generating ice is amazing, right? You're not going to be using that all the time, but the times you do want to use it, hey, there it is, ready to go for you. Whether that's escaping or if you want to loot that treasure chest at the back of the room as the last thing you do, you know, hey, you've got the option right here. Very, very valuable. I don't think too much need to be said about that. The top half of Lifting Gust I showcased in a pull and push combo earlier. So I think the other thing to say about Lifting Gust is I tend to evaluate this card, especially at level 1. You're probably joining the game at level 2, I'd imagine, as a Snowdancer if you unlock the class early. So this card will certainly live with you for a very long time. And one of the items I like to pick up with the Lifting Gust is this item, Weighted Net, as a starting item. Like I said, on +3 difficulties, I think on lower difficulties, many people see Lifting Gust as basically a soft disarm, because if you're at a range 3 to an enemy and you push them for 4, so an example could be you're here, the enemy is at range 1, 2, 3 to you, and you're pushing this guy for 4, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. This guy is effectively out of the fight. But on higher level difficulties, you can see, let me just demonstrate, on the lower level difficulties, You can see maybe at level 3, Algoth's Guard only moves 4 spaces. At level 4, only 4 spaces. Level 5 at 5, but then when you get to level 7, they actually move 6 paces at a time. So even if you might have done this maximum push, right, at the range 3 into 4 pushes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, this guy will get back to you on the same round. So this is what I mean by on +3 difficulties at 4 players, you often will find some of the strategies you can deploy at lower difficulties doesn't really work the way you want it to. So I actually don't see Lifting Gust as much of a soft disarm, as more of a very strong piece in my push and pull combo. But in addition, like I said, I like to start with Weighted Net, and I'll talk more about items when I get to the item section for the guide. But yeah, Weighted Net for me is just such a key item for the Snowdancer, and you can carry this all the way through to your level 9 and you find it helpful, and that's because this is a very strong combo. By pushing this guy out 7 paces with Immobilize added, not only are you 100% ensuring this guy is not coming for you next round, if you think about it, like sometimes most enemies will have some actions where they take that, you know, it's kind of like a waste of a turn, right? So the Algoth's Guard is a good example. They have 2 actions whereby they stand around and do nothing. So you can very strategically do this immobilization, right? Just because the enemy is on top of you doesn't mean necessarily you want to do this, but if you do it, right, you can think about it. If the guards have drawn like maybe half their deck and they haven't drawn the stand around thing yet, then you know you have like a 50-50 chance of them standing around doing nothing. This could be a time to just push them out and immobilize them early in the initiative. Not only do you avoid them standing around attacking you, but they potentially, you know, will get here, maybe even waste a couple of rounds, and you can spend your time dealing with your party on the rest of the enemies that's currently waiting on you. So yes, it is a disarm, but only in the context when I can apply Weighted Net to it. I wouldn't otherwise rely on this as a, you know, as a soft disarm like you would on the lower levels. Generating wind is super helpful. One experience obviously is very helpful as well. So crosswinds. I actually, you know, like I said, I tend to see the Snowdancer as the wind waker. So you can see already the 3 cards I really like all have some kind of wind and you know, association to it. White Winds, Lifting Gust, and Crosswinds. But I think Crosswind is just such a great card. Top half says grant an ally will move 2 and attack 3. I already said that you can combine this with Burning Tempest at level 2, giving one ally a move 4, jump, attack 3. This is fantastic, right? If you think about the uses you can do with this card, if you need to open a room, you know, you can go something like, you can go super fast with White Winds, heal your ally, move them forward, and then move them forward again at attack. That would be a move 4, attack 3, initiative 11 for your ally. You can combine that with Bird and Tempest. Now you can move them 4 forward, jumping into the room, doing attack. And then your ally can immediately follow up, maybe on initiative 20, 21, whatever. Drifter, right, can go on 23, for example, and then continue that, hey, kick the door down, attack sequence. And that will give you a lot of advantage, especially with some characters like Drifter, who doesn't necessarily have the best initiative sometimes. You helping them moving forward like this will be just amazing. Of course, this also works with things like Bone Shaper's summons. You can get them to attack out of turn. Bone Shaper tend to have very good attack modifiers. In fact, the top half of the card is good for anybody any of your allies who has a good attack modifier. You know, I talked about Drifter already. Drifter, this will be effectively attack 5, assuming Crushing Weight is out. Bone Shaper is a great attack modifier deck. Blink Blaze great attack modifier deck. I mean, there's some, like I said, I don't want to talk too much about unlock classes, but this simple action of moving to attack 3 has so much usage to it, and this is just fantastic. It allows your allies to draw attack modifier decks, allow them to utilize things like Strengthen. Yeah, the possibility is endless. It's a super versatile card, and the top half is an action I like to do all the time at a lower level for my Snowdancer. I say lower level because as you get to a higher level, one of Snowdancer's biggest issue I find is you lack good bottom actions. There's so many good top actions you can do, and they're all super efficient and valuable, that even an action as good as this sometimes just becomes not as good as some of the other cards you get to unlock. And that's when I start to use the bottom more. Once you have the hazardous terrain set up, I've showcased already, the bottom half of Crosswind gives you a great piece of puzzle in the pull and push combo attack that you can do, and the fact that you can drag an enemy from a range 4 for 3 and you can move afterwards is just amazing. There's so much versatility to this. Even if you're just doing a move 3, that's not a problem. Added to this, you can pull an ally back into you. Again, if your ally is in a super dangerous situation, you can pull them back. If your Blink Blades dive, going too deep into the enemy's backline, now needs to retreat, hey, pull them back 3 steps. Although, don't put them into spikes. But yeah, Crosswind, I think between these 3 cards, I think the Diamond and Lifting Gust does mean they're better, they're more interesting enhancement options, but I find most of the time just simple +1 onto the bottom half of White Winds or +1 onto either the top or bottom of Crosswinds is just more than serviceable for your enhancement options. Next 2 cards are strictly for me healing cards, and I like to take them especially early on. As you get stronger and you level up on the Snowdancer, you find that even in a 4-player game, your healing need is more than fulfilled by some of the later cards you pick up, / the attack modifier cards you can draw. And this is the interesting thing about Snowdancer, right? If you're just purely healing 2 at range 3 regen, it's a good action, but it's not going to be efficient against a +3 difficulty monster attack. The fact that Snowdancer is such a unique and great support defensive class is because there are many attacks, and you can do many multi-target attacks that help go through your attack modifier deck very quickly. And if in practice, roughly every 5 card drawn, you get to do a heal, and every like 10 cards drawn, maybe that's a bit too much, maybe every like 7 or 8 cards drawn, you get to put a ward onto your ally on average. So if you just do simply like like strengthen the 3 target attack, you got to get some healing out of it. So later on, a heal 2 range for the regen is just no longer good enough. But very early on, Snowball is a card I like to take into many of my fights. It generates an ice, which is useful if you're needing to set up ice, in particular with cards like Cold Therapy. It is a top half action, but a range 3 heal 2 with a regen is actually pretty good. So this is type of card I like to play in between rooms. When you've cleared a single room, then you can slap this on to an ally of yours, and that regen will slowly tick away and heal up even more hit points for the ally. I think Snowball is just a great card to. It's a bit of a filler card, but at level 1 is a valuable card. The bottom half of Snowball is a very interesting persistent loss. It says on your next 5 attacks, you get to add X damage, where X is the number of use slot. So effectively you get to add 0 damage first, then 1 damage, then 2 damage, then 3 damage, and 4 damage onto your multi-target attack. And many people like to combine like Snowball with White Winds because you can exhaust, if you set this up correctly, exhaust all of the persistence tracker on Snowball immediately across White Winds, and then this attack 4 with Wind can potentially become like attack 4, attack 5, attack 6, attack 7, attack 8. So you can do quite a lot of damage very, very quickly. I can see the merit to that, but once again, I feel like every time I've played the Snowdancer, I'm in a 4-player party where I'm not really the person tasked with doing damage. Or rather, it's much better for me to keep the other damage class going by healing them, by warding them, by putting them into the right position, or if I really want to do damage, by setting up ice spikes so everybody can use it, rather than doing something like blowing out 2 cards. And these 2 cards, White Winds, I want to keep it for the initiative. I don't necessarily want to blow this out too early, so maybe this is like a last room thing, but I'm often dropping Snowball quite quickly because the top action is sort of a filler action. I kind of want to keep, like I said, I want to keep like the bottom action, like White House is a very good example. The bottom side allows you to move 3, heal 2 at range 1. I much prefer the bottom side of this rather than continue to keep top of Snowball. So wanting to keep like this card for the bottom half to blow out in the last room, and then I have to do enough targeted attacks to fit some weird pattern like the White Wind. I just don't find that's happening to me a lot. And on top of that, I've never had like completely blown out draw. I mean, technically it's possible to draw these rolling modifier decks, this rolling modifier cards 4 in a row. It is technically possible. It hasn't happened to me that often enough for me to want to do that. So yeah, I think there is definitely a combo to be set here. But maybe I'm just too conservative. I just like to play slow and steady with my Snowdancer, and often I ignore the bottom half of Snowball. So Whiteout. Whiteout, I think between these two cards, Snowball has the added bonus of generating an ice, which is quite useful if you want to bounce element around for things like cold therapy bottom half. Whiteout is just a bit vanilla, but vanilla is good, right? Initiative 21 will beat most of the enemy's initiatives. Move 3 is great, will get you to most places. You're typically 2 steps away from the front line most of the time, so move 3 will definitely get you to your troubled friend who's kind of stuck in the middle of the enemy crowd. And then heal 2 range 1 is just good enough. You can heal yourself, you know, you can heal your allies, you can heal your allies summon, whatever it is. There's a lot of things you can do here with the bottom Whiteout, and even on level 9 I sometimes find myself turning to Whiteout if I feel like I need a bit of healing, additional healing for the party, because it's going to be a very heavy damage pressured scenario. Top half of Whiteout I think is a similar analysis I have to the top half of White Winds. In fact, the name of the card sounds kind of similar. Attack 2, target 3, range 4, so it's very versatile. You can definitely find 3 targets on a 4-player map. Control target with attack abilities to move 1, which is great, especially if you got the hazardous terrain set up. But then once again, if you have the hazardous terrain set up already, why don't you just do the bottom of Crosswind into Lifting Gust over and over again? And there are many other ways you could do this, right? As we will see in the cards, this is not the only way you can do a push and pull combo. I just don't find I need to necessarily lose a card just for this to happen. It does represent a lot of damage, don't get me wrong, especially if they're grounded enemies walking into spikes. But yeah, I just often find that my other actions are more efficient than my loss action, and I don't really justify losing a loss action for Snowdancer. In particular, I find, maybe this goes back to the way I play the Snowdancer. Snowdancer for me is a support defensive class, like I said. It helps to prolong the longevity of your party, and you blowing yourself out of the water early on just to do damage, I just find it's not worth it. I much prefer extending the longevity for the other 3 party members, who can then consistently dish out more efficient damage. So yeah, maybe it's efficiency that's preventing me from doing the top half of Whiteout often. I just like efficient, safe plays, and the safe play is to play the bottom half of Whiteout. Okay, staying with that theme, let's talk about the next 3 set of cards. These are the 3 set of cards I like to call Initiative 70 cards. So far we've seen quite a decent chunk of Initiative. Initiative 11 clearly is the best. The next few cards are somewhere in between 20 to 30. You know, these are the cards I like to think, it won't get you out in a pinch if you really have to beat one card out from the monster deck. But if you're doing a little bit of probability and the consequences are not too catastrophic, these 4 cards will kind of do the job to get you to go first most of the time. Whereas these cards will definitely get you to go last most of the time. So you got to pair them quite carefully. Starting with Frigid Growth. Now, Frigid Growth I showcased a little bit earlier around the setting up of the Ice Spikes. This is your only card at level 1 that helps you set up Ice Spike. It is very versatile though. Is 1 hex terrain in a featureless hex within range 3, and you get to buff an ally next to the hex. The second part of the card, I don't find it to be that useful. You know, like buffing an ally that then lasts 1 round, unless you're really buffing someone like a Blink Blade who's about to do 1,000,000 attacks, then I think it's probably worth it. But most of the time, like if you're just buffing Drifter for like 1 attack, yes, it's nice, but it's not that, you know, game changing. So I would say the buff is good to have, but don't necessarily force yourself to buff your ally every time you want to use this. More important is to use that 1 hex hazardous terrain carefully, and to create some kind of control damage manipulation opportunity for push and pulling enemy over it. Even just 1 hex can do a lot of damage, right? If you have like, you know, just 1 hex like this within range 3 with you standing behind it, just by virtue of having an enemy like getting push then pull across it multiple times, it could do quite a lot of damage. And especially, right, you can force enemy to go into it. If you have like multiple enemies coming in and you're engaging a corridor like this, then this enemy has to step onto hazardous terrain. Next enemy has to step over the hazardous terrain. So, and you know, like if you did something like this, the rest enemies can't actually attack you. So there's quite a lot of ways you can use this one hex very effectively. It also generates ice, which is not bad, but later on, this action is just no longer efficient enough, especially for top half action. I find generating one hex is, you know, is great, and the fact that you can do ranged is great, but equally, when you can generate two, you might also generate two, right? Because every one of these hex that you generate is just basically potential damage. It's like potential damage is saved up in those ice spikes. And of course, the more potential damage you generate on the map, the better. The bottom half of Fisher Growth, a move to jump, I think is okay. Most often, I think at earlier levels, you're using it strictly speaking for the top half, and you might even drink a stamina potion just to recover the top half. So you can do this action again and create a wall of 2 hex ice spikes. So earlier levels, I find very rarely you using it for the bottom. And as you level up very quickly, this card will drop off when we have better options of creating ice spikes. So the bottom half of Frigid Growth, I rarely ever play because it's just not something you want to do at earlier level, and the card is gone by the time you get to the later levels. Now, Enticing Breeze is a super interesting card, and is again earlier level is one of your push and pull puzzles. So like actually these 2 cards combo really well. You can do Enticing Breeze, attack 1, range 3, pull 2. If you empower it with wind, you get to do 2 more damage with an EXP, which is fine. But the more important, you can pull enemy towards one of your allies. So rather than pulling towards you, you're pulling towards your allies. And like I said, if you're playing a 4-player party, often, you know, your allies can be on the front line, fighting some enemies. So a good example could be like I showcased earlier. It could be something like this, right? Your allies standing in front, you're behind your ally, and you're often right behind your ally. And 3 range away from the enemy is fairly reasonable for you to reach. And in those situations, Enticing Breeze allows you to attack the enemy and drag it towards your allies. So, you know, like even in this situation, you could move here and do this. You could do like this, so it doesn't necessarily put you in danger. So, you know, you can see even a very narrow corridor, Enticing Breeze basically act as most of the time a nice pull, and because you're pulling towards your allies and you're not on the front line, that normally means it's a better action for you to do. Now this, again, similar to the other push and pull combos I showcased, you can pull an enemy towards the allies, and then you can do anything on the bottom half like Blizzard, move 3, push 2 at range 1 to push the enemy straight back out from these terrains, dealing massive damage to grounded enemies. So yeah, Enticing Breeze, definitely a good action early on. The bottom half, I think people tend to say, hey, this is the reason why you play Chilling Impact, right? Because if you do have ice up, and so far we've seen what, 2 actions that generate ice, non-loss, Snowball and Frigid Growth. I mean, I guess this maybe goes into a little bit why I don't like to play Chilling Impact earlier on, and then later on I just end up not playing it much at all, because, you know, Frigid Growth is really a thing you want to do on the very first round, because you have some distance with the enemies. Again, on +3 difficulties, enemies approach you very, very quickly. They close the gap really quickly. So if you're doing this on the first round, that means you're not doing Frigid Growth on the first round at lower levels, which is really not what you want to do, because once the enemy is in front of you, the value of this drops, because, you know, you've already lost that first opportunity to deal the damage to the enemy before they hit you. And yeah, I just find it's much more useful to do this rather than Chilling Impact first round. And these 2 cards are kind of complementary in the sense that you need to have done this to power this. So you need to get this up, then do this, and then it's only on the 3rd round you get this. Of course, you could use the bottom half of Frigid Growth to pair with Chilling Impact, but then you're losing the ability to create obstacles, hazardous terrains. So yeah, you can see even though they're supposed to complement each other, in reality I found you just don't have the time to get both of these out effectively quickly enough, so then I end up not doing Chilling Impact. So I think the bottom half of Enticing Breeze is often evaluated in conjunction with Chilling Impact. The idea is, you know, there's no attack here, but technically you can pull a lot of enemies forward for one. And then if you best case scenario, you have like 4 + 3 + 3, 10 enemies, they all step forward for one. With single ice, you're doing 10 pure damage to that group of people. Sounds amazing, right? But in reality, I find that doesn't happen very often. Mostly because in a 4-player game, there's always something in the way. So like even in an open room like this, if you have your allies like engage in some kind of skirmishes, there's a few obstacles and things lying around, and yeah, there are enemies here, but they might be like sort of scattered sometimes, and it's quite hard for you to get into a position to like, in this situation, what am I really doing here? Pulling one guy forward? And that's really it. Even though this feels like this is a situation where the bottom half of Enticing Breeze will shine, and of course it is a bottom action, so you have to move into a location first, or otherwise be already in position to do it, by which time the enemy's position could have changed. But even in this type of very typical fighting situation, even with chilling impact, what am I really doing here? Let's say I'm in this location to pull maybe like a triple rank here. I can make this guy, well, he can't move, so he's already within range 2 of me, so then this guy can't really move. I guess he can go here and take maybe 1 damage from chilling impact and 4 from the spikes, but then this guy can't really move. So you end up just not doing as much as you think you would most of the time. I think that's a bottom problem I have with Enticing Breeze. Certainly sometimes it really shines because you can move like 3 people into spikes, dealing 12 damage to them. Fantastic. But most of the time I find the bottom half, I want to use it well, but I don't know, I never find the space to use it properly, especially given it's a bottom action. Maybe if this was a top action, I really wish there was attack associated with this though, because even if it's just attack 0, that would be amazing, because I just want to see more of my rolling modifiers, healing modifiers, strengthening modifiers. So yeah, unfortunately Enticing Breeze for me, the bottom half of this action sounds good on paper, but in fact drops off for me very quickly, and that's why overall this card is not one of my core cards, because the bottom half is not super reliable to pull off, and the top half, whilst it's nice, but most of the time I find just you are, like I said, you're competing really for the top half slot as a Snowdancer, right? So the top is nice, but the competition is just too fierce. And if the bottom was better, I probably would take the bottom in. Like if this had a move 1 on it or attack 0 on it, I'm probably more likely to take Enticing Breeze. But Enticing Breeze, it is a level 1 card, so maybe it's not expected to compete with some of the later cards. But I find this is one of the cards I cut very quickly, if I'm taking it with me at all on the later levels. And Blizzard. Now, top half of Blizzard is basically, I ignore it completely. I mean, you can use it to get EXP maybe. That's mostly what I use it for. Secondary action would be if I really needed everyone to wear leather armor on my team this round, I might blow it out for the model, but most of the time I'm not taking it for the top half. Attack 2, range 3 model with your attack modifier deck translates into mostly just attack 2s, and yeah, you're probably not catching like 7 enemies in this pattern most of the time, even on 4 players. I think sometimes I'm catching like maybe 4 or 5 enemies in this. It is 10 damage, but there's nothing unique to it, because when the interesting thing with Frosthaven on +3 difficulty is most of the monsters you want to use this action on, so i.e. monsters without shield, are like these guys. They are really tanky. Even the archers, right? They're really tanky. So that like doing 2 damage to them is good, but it's not an efficient loss action for the Snowdancer, because there's nothing else to it. It's not like if Blinkblade did this will be like mostly attack 4 on average because of the deck, but you don't have that deck, so most of the time this is just end up being attack 2, attack 3 at most. So against these guys, that's not enough of a chip damage. I know it sounds crazy. So if this had Pierce on it, like even Pierce 2, I would be more inclined to bring it with me, because then the shield enemies are really annoying, and this will be a great way to deal with shield enemies. So I almost wish this was attack 2, I don't know, maybe even consuming like ice and wind to make it pierce would be fine here if we think it's going to be too overpowered. But some kind of additional condition, like, I don't know, Pierce would be great, Wound would be great, Poison would be great, but maybe it's not very thematic. Muddle is okay. It's okay. It's not the best conditions, but it's okay. Sometimes I'll do it. Most of the time I'm doing this for the XP at the end of the scenario. Sometimes I'll do it for the muddle. Rarely am I really counting on this to do enough damage to make it that much of a difference. Damage is nice, but it's okay. Mostly I'm taking it for the bottom half. Now I probably should compare this card with Chilling Impact bottom half, because at the first glance they look very, very similar. Move 3 and a move 2, so you do lose one movement here, although most of the time I don't find that to be too much of an issue, especially given you're mostly 2 away from the front line or 3 away from the enemies. But the big difference here is this one says target all. So target all means you get to target all enemies around you. It doesn't target allies. I know some people I think have confused this. Target all is the fact that you can maybe push your allies. No, you don't, unless it otherwise says so. Target all just means target all enemies within range 1 with you, whereas this only targets one enemy within range 1. So Chilling Impact is just much better if you are in a situation, you know, if you are like, I don't know, maybe this type of situation where you are putting in like multiple enemies into you with some kind of pulling action like Whipping Gale, and you can push them all out. That, you know, it's gonna be much better. Whereas if you're mostly dealing with smaller amount of concentration of enemies, Blizzard bottom halves just give you that extra movement range, so that might just put you in the exact right position you want to maximize the push. But in any case, I think Blizzard, mostly I'm taking it for the bottom half. It's actually deceptively good bottom half action, especially like longer scenarios where you're like, maybe I just want the extra movement rather than the benefit of getting extra target. Blizzard is your go-to at the lower levels for the Snowdancer. So these two, I think I've spent quite a bit of time on the persistent abilities already. Cold Therapy, I said earlier, clearly a very good persistent abilities. The Heal 2, Range 2 just outclasses many of the defensive healing abilities from any of the other classes. It's very efficient. It keeps up extremely well on higher level difficulties, because 2 hit point is more often than not on higher levels more than 2 effective hit point, because your allies will have shields, your allies will have armor, your allies will have loads of defensive modifier they can naturally deploy. Think Drifter, for example, most of the time is gonna 2 hit point for the Drifter represents quite a lot more hit points, because the Drifter will be wearing armor, the Drifter will have like maybe persistent shields, right? So this is a very, very good action to do, and I think Cold Therapy is amazing, just absolutely amazing in any scenario where you guys just have to stand in a corner and survive infinite spawns of enemies. This just adds up so quickly. It also means combined with your other top and bottom action like Snowball and Whiteout, you can easily restore like 6 hit point or 7 if you down the initiative order right for an ally in one round. That basically brings someone from the brink of death to a reasonable health. So Cold Therapy, earlier on, you know, if you're joining the game at level 2, right, Snowdancer is your first unlock class, I almost find the Snowdancer just my exclusive Cold Therapist at that point until we get to the higher level. Just a great action, great to deploy on the first rest cycle and just let it rip. The only thing you have to remember is a range 2 heal, so you have to keep up with your allies, and that sometimes can be a little bit difficult, because your allies, especially like a Blink Blade, could just run out of the room all the time. This pairs great with Bone Shaper, by the way. I've played one campaign once, a Snowdancer with a Bone Shaper who was doing the skeleton build. Oh my god, the Bone Shaper loved me. The two of us just stood at the back, I constantly throwing out range attacks and the Bone Shaper constantly producing skeletons. Now, top half of Cold Therapy, I actually find is a pretty good action. Like I said, Ice is slightly harder to generate because, again, if you look at your cards, right, like Lifting Gust, just an action you naturally want to do. Snowball is more of a conditional action. You obviously don't want to do that on the first couple rounds when you probably haven't taken that much damage. Frigid Growth, yes, is a reasonable action to do, so maybe this is something on level 1 you do after Frigid Growth for the top half of Cold Therapy if you're not playing the bottom half. But then again, if you're not playing the bottom half of Cold Therapy, why are you bringing this into your deck? Initiative 20 doesn't really compete. Like if this was Initiative 10, maybe Initiative 20, it's okay, but you already got quite a lot of cards in this range, so you're not necessarily bringing it for the initiative. You're certainly not bringing it for the muddle, surely. So yeah, I guess
Sometimes there's scenarios where I bring this in because I think maybe I want to do this, but maybe I don't want to do it on the first rest cycle, especially you got 11 cards, right? So if you play this and after your long rest, you end up with 9 cards, which is a bit annoying, especially if you don't have stamina potion yet. So sometimes I want to bring this card in because I want to do it on the second rest cycle when I have 10 cards and I can lose one and then lose another one. Then I'm down to 8 cards, so I have like an even hand in the next 2 rest cycles as well. So sometimes I bring in cold therapy because I want to do the bottom half, but not necessarily right away. Then I'll try to set up for top half. Attack 3, 1 EXP, range 3 model is a reasonable action, but nothing to write home about. Certainly later on, I think later on, especially if I'm not playing a survive X number of rounds mission, I'm just playing like maybe a normal kill them all type of mission. I find cold therapy just end up over healing most of the time. Your team just has so much healing capabilities naturally through the things you do already. I find that a lot of time cold therapy becomes a little bit unnecessary because you have such good damage mitigation too otherwise. Now, Chilling Impact, I think I've talked so much about this card already. I don't really feel like I need to say more about this. I mean, the bottom half I talked about, top half I've talked about. I think maybe quick look at Ice Generation at this level. I think I've already said, right, Ice Generation really is just these 2 cards. That's non-loss. You know, you're not playing the bottom half of this to generate ice, nor are you playing the top half of this to generate ice. So this is why I find Chilling Impact right off the get-go is quite hard to use, whereas bottom half Cold Therapy allows you to take ice or wind. So that flexibility actually just makes Cold Therapy consistently better at level 1 than Chilling Impact. Because Chilling Impact, you know, you got to generate ice and you got to do the force movement, which is not always guaranteed because like you got this, you got this, you got this, yes, but then you need to set up like your turn has got to be like first round set this up, maybe with this move, but then you lose the spikes. So I'd rather kind of keep the spike and do the push and pull and use the spike to do 4 damage to a single target than spread the damage out on 1 damage to multiple targets. So I think this is where the difficulty comes in of using Chilling Impact at a lower level, and a higher level just find 1 damage with ice. It's just not really worth it. But of course, if you do want to go into that direction because your team's not doing a lot of damage and they don't care about spikes damage for some reason because nobody likes that, you could try the Chilling Impact build. Definitely I find it's not that effective on higher levels, but if you are doing it, you probably want to get the ice out right away with something like Frigid Growth into Chilling Impact on the very first round, and then on the next round you can do something maybe like Blizzard. You can push forward and push people, right? But this is only 1 target, remember. I almost find it's kind of funny, if the bottom half of Chilling Impact was on Blizzard, I actually find that combo to be much better. But you could definitely do it like Blizzard into like Lifting Gust, and then, you know, because this is at the end of each of your force movement, you could target the same target with Blizzard and Lifting Gust, and that will create 2 pure damage. But even still, right, let's say you set that up, even still you've done 2 pure damage into a single attack. Yes, you've pushed the enemy away maybe 7 squares, but like I said, they move so fast anyway, they can probably just get back into you unless you've immobilized them with net, like I said earlier. So even with all of that set up, you have mostly just done probably 3 damage. Versus if you set this up on the first round, next round you do something as simple as like Crosswind into Lifting Gust, you have probably done 8 damage by that point through the spikes along. So this is why I find the spikes just a superior way of dealing damage if that's what you're wanting to do, and that's what your team requires you to do, than to set up Chilling Impact. So anyway, enough said. I think everybody probably heard enough of me ranting about Chilling Impact versus Cold Therapy already. Let's move on to the other 4 cards you get at level 1. Now, at level 1, obviously you can take one of these 4 cards in with you, because I think you're probably mostly taking the rest of these guys. What are you really taking here? Now, I think if you are very interested in using Cold Therapy, I will highly recommend you actually take Nature's Breath, and maybe drop just like Chilling Impact or Blizzard at that point, and then bring Blinding Vortex in with you. The reasoning is thus: Nature's Breath, the top half, I think I talked about in my section about summons. It's okay. I don't often find the opportunity to deploy it at +3/4 players, but if it does get deployed, it does do a good job if you can keep it alive long enough. But more importantly, the bottom half is great, and the initiative on this card is great. So far, if we look across the initiative, this is the latest initiative you're going to get at level 1. And Nature's Breath basically says, hey, you will always go last with this card, and that's sometimes what you need to do, and it's great. And not only that, the move 2 with jump is okay, and they generate wind, which is fantastic. So if you are in need of elements, especially because you need to feed elements to your cold therapy every round, Nature's Breath is just a great bottom action to guarantee you that element, and sometimes guaranteeing going late means you're not being focused, and that's amazing too. Staying on the movement theme, I talked a bit about Blinding Vortex bottom half already. The move 3 jump is often the way I find to get across my own obstacles without taking damage. Although taking damage is not necessarily that bad. You have enough of a hit point track at hit point 20 at level 9, and you can always put ward on yourself, so you halve the incoming damage from the spikes. So it's not often always the problem, but yeah, if you do need to get across your own spikes, move 3 jump is more than enough with the bottom half of Blinding Vortex, and that's why sometimes I'm taking this into the fight. Top half is interesting card. The attack 2, and you can have 3 elements combined to bolster into attack 4, push 2, disarm, gain 3 experience. The disarm is great. You don't naturally generate light other than through the Spirit's Call, and to be honest, that's not really why you should be bringing the Spirit's Call. So you're mostly relying on your ally to generate the light for you, or you can bring into the fight with your circulative element to do that. But I find most of the time I don't really want to be in this position against a lot of enemies. So I think earlier on definitely is super helpful with Blinding Vortex, especially maybe against the exploding robots. If you disarm them, then they don't explode because they haven't attacked. That's definitely a great way of using this. So Blinding Vortex top half definitely has its uses. I'm mostly not bringing in for the damage. I'm mostly bringing in for the potential to disarm on a very critical, opportune moment. The funny thing is, Blinding Vortex, you would have thought that it has some synergy with Chilling Impact, because naturally if you power it with wind, you'll be doing a lot of damage to people through the pushing, but then you are not powering the ice on the +2 damage. So it's kind of funny that the card you naturally think will have a lot of impact with Chilling Impact. The Chilling Impact top half actually reduces the efficacy of Blinding Vortex attack damage. So you're sacrificing 2 attack damage for 1 pure damage, which is a bit of a weird trade-off. I don't know what to say. I almost wish maybe Blinding Vortex was like, I don't know, not ice, something else, right, to power the damage. That would be great. Maybe like light and dark and wind, I don't know, who knows. But funny that these 2 cards that naturally should work together don't work together all that well. Okay, Spirit's Call and Gathering Force. Now these 2 cards I almost never use. I can see maybe Spirit's Call being useful if you are coming in at level 1 Snowdancer and you don't really have any other good options. Then okay, yeah, attack 3, curse with range 3, and I will only bring this card in if I can get a +1 damage and the curse, which is not that hard to get a win going. But yeah, you should if you're using the top half, definitely please use it with the wind powered already. It's okay, it's not anything special. What else can I say? It is a range attack that you can use weighted net on, I suppose. But yeah, not much more to say about that. Cursing is not really a central theme with this character. I don't think you curse anywhere else and on any of your other cards. So yeah, strange that there is a little curse symbol here. It doesn't really do enough for me to warrant bringing this card in. Bottom half, push 4 all allies in range 3 bless. Works great with Bone Shaper, but that's really about it. If the Bone Shaper's got like a lot of skeletons out, pushing them all forward, giving them bless is great. But it is just bless though. It's not. I think maybe if this will like push 4 target all allies range 3 strengthen, I can get on board with that. I think that's probably just overall better. Spreading a lot of curses amongst your allies, especially if you have allies who don't do a lot of natural attacks. You know, if you have like trap, for example, in your team, like I currently have on my YouTube campaign, you just really don't want to be doing this bottom action. So maybe situationally useful if you need to like get your team to somewhere, but often than not, I don't find this action to be that useful because you have just so many better ways of moving your allies as non-loss. It is helpful on lower level difficulties if you're attempting the solo scenario, I do admit that, but otherwise, yeah, Spirit's Call, mostly I'm not calling on it to join me in any fight. And then finally I have Gathering Force. I just wish Gathering Force was better. The top half Gathering Force is at the end of each of your turns you can empower Ice or Wind. So basically it guarantees you an element every single round for whatever usage. So you might think naturally Gathering Force goes well with Chilling Impact, goes well with Cold Therapy. You wouldn't be wrong here, other than the fact that it reduces your push and pull and other force movement effect by 1. Just why? I don't I don't really understand why that's necessary, but hey, there it is. So in fact, it doesn't really work with Chilling Impact because it turns the bottom half of this card, Enticing Breeze, into pool 0 range 2. So effectively it does nothing at that point. I just, even with like Cold Therapy, I often find, yes, I do want to guarantee heal every round, but then I also want to get the most out of my push and pull ability, because most of the time I'm fulfilling, like if I'm playing a defend in the corner type of scenario, right, then I can deploy Cold Therapy first round and drop Frigid Growth the first round, and then I can start to use the spikes to do damage while maintaining a constant stream of healing. It's a very natural pace for your Snowdancer. Reducing the push and pull by 1 just lessens that impact drastically. It means that sometimes when you can put enemy out of your reach so that they don't hit you, you can no longer do that anymore because of Gathering Force. I think there's only one time I've ever played Gathering Force and I've immensely regretted it, because I played it in conjunction with Cold Therapy thinking, hey, this will just guarantee me a heal 2 every single round, and I regretted it almost immediately because every time I wanted to do a push and pull, I have to think about reducing the value by 1, and this just makes it that much less useful. So unfortunately, top half Gathering Force, I almost wish it just said that at the end of each turn, you can generate Ice and Wind. That's it. Delete the rest of the text. I don't know. Would that be too powerful? I don't know. I'm not sure. But anyway, the second half of that sentence just makes this gathering dust most of the time for me. The bottom half, Loot 1 is fine without any movement. It's harder to use, but Loot 1 is fine. Gain advantage on your next attack this round. Why not just gain strengthened? Wouldn't that just be easier, simpler to understand, strengthen yourself? Then I think Gathering Force might actually come in for a bit of action here and then, because strengthen is just a good condition to have, and it might change my opinion about and some kind of attacking Snowdancer. But unfortunately, this card is just not designed in such a way. Maybe the whole idea of this card is, hey, if you're a new player and you're struggling with Snowdancer because you can't manage the element correctly, then why not have a crutch to help you? Yeah, I don't know. The crutch is just not that exciting. So I would say off the level 1 cards, I'm mostly taking these cards, and then I'm picking maybe 1 or 2 out of these depending on the situation. Maybe I'm leaving Chilling Impact at home, but definitely I'm not taking Spirit's Call or Gathering Force most of the time. Okay, let's have a look at the level 2 cards then. So level 2, Burzian Tempest, I think I talked a lot about. I think this is the card every Snowdancer should be picking in a 4-player game, in a +3 game. It is just so much more impactful than Tornado. The move 3, all allies gets extra 2 move and jump to their abilities this round. If you haven't played a lot of Frosthaven, maybe that sounds like not that good, but it's actually amazing. It's just amazing. If you watch my YouTube campaign, you'll see Burzian Tempest does so much work in any scenario where any type of movement is required. And of course, as I said earlier, escorting VIP. This is the VIP in the escorting VIP mission. It also means that you don't have to bring into every single mission. If you have any mission where you don't require a lot of movement and your allies don't need to move too much, Burzian Tempest can just stay home. You don't need to bring it with you. I'm not ever bringing it in because I need the 2 owls. I think they are quite nice to have, but yeah, most of the time they're competing with the bottom half of this, which is the real reason why I am bringing Birds in a Tempest with me. Unfortunately, against it is Tornado. Well, maybe it's unfortunate for Tornado because Tornado doesn't really compete against Birds in a Tempest. Top half is a lost 3 damage, rank 3 triple, like this flower pattern attack, and you get to control all targets of attack ability by 1. So it's basically a bit of upgraded whiteout if you think about it, and it generates wind and it gives you 2 experience. So on paper, this is not a bad attack. Spellweaver has similar attacks in what's it called, in Gloomhaven, especially Gloomhaven 2nd edition. It's not a bad attack. Not a bad attack by any means, but it's just not that exciting compared to what you can do with Birds in Tempest. And then the move 3 jump, push 1 target enemy or ally. This is such a great ability. I already talked about how Snowdancer has a lot of top action that competes, so you really want a good bottom action. This is very good as a bottom action. Like, I like all parts of this bottom action. It's just not as good as Birds in Tempest. So yeah, unfortunately, I'm taking Birds in Tempest every single time at level 2, and yeah, I've never regretted doing that. Okay, level 3. I think level 3, I can see why you may want to take Polar Vortex. Is designate hex within range 3, pull to target all enemies within range 3, and then you pull towards a targeted designated hex. So this is basically Spellweaver's ability from whatever level it was back in Gloomhaven. So yeah, it's a cool ability. It's an interesting ability. You basically, if I can demonstrate, if this was a situation, right, you can designate this hex, then you can pull enemy like this into it, but then you're only really putting one guy into it. So you kind of want a situation where you have like maybe multiple like this, right, and then you can designate this hex within range 3 of you, then it pulls everyone in like that, then you can do some damage like this. But it's okay. There are a lot of creative uses to this card, especially combined with other of your allies who maybe do terrain manipulation, lay down traps, for example. The Polar Vortex can definitely do a lot. So I think Polar Vortex is a card maybe you will bring if you are playing with, like, if all your team is doing some kind of terrain manipulation, and that is a real possibility in Frosthaven. And you don't often have the space to create your own hazardous terrains to do your combo. Maybe Polar Vortex is a good card to be bringing. But most of the time, I find I'm leaning towards Cold Snap when I play Snowdancer, because I said earlier about this ability to create a triple hex of hazardous terrain very quickly, and Cold Snap is just such a big part of that strategy. And I like the initiative on Cold Snap. I guess maybe this applies to Birds in Tempest as well. Although, even if this initiative has swapped, I think I'll still be taking Birds in Tempest. But yeah, the initiative here, 18 is just better than 59. Similarly, 86 is just much better than 61, because this will basically guarantee you going last, which is what you want with an ability like Cold Snap. And I think I've talked about this enough already. Maybe I haven't really said much about the 3 enemies occupying hazardous terrain. Remember, this doesn't have to be a terrain you've created. It could just be any 3 enemies occupying any hazardous terrain. It doesn't even need to be in line of sight. There's no line of sight here. You could be in a completely different room. You could be on a completely different floor, and they'll still take the pure damage. So this is kind of very good as an opening salvo in the Snowdancer's toolkit, combined with that level 5 card, Shifting Snow, I talked about earlier. And later on in your life, when you find you don't need to generate hazardous terrain anymore, a range 3 ally heal 2 with Strengthen is a fantastic action. So yeah, whereas I think compare that against Polar Vortex, it is a attack 5, target 2, range 3, but I think I've already said, I'm not going to repeat too much. Attacking with Snowdancer in the traditional sense isn't that exciting. For me, it's just more satisfying to be setting up hazardous terrains and putting enemies through it and watching their HP melt that way. So most of the time, I'm taking Cold Snap here. Now, level 4, I think, is a very interesting choice, and level 4, I guess maybe is the turning point for your Snowdancer. I personally like Zephyr Barrier for the top half action alone. I think I talked a lot about that already. I'm not going to say too much more, other than Ward is amazing on +3 difficulties. The bottom half of the card is akin to the Source ability, where you basically give one of your allies a permanent shield 1. Permanent shield 1 is fantastic. If your allies already have permanent shield deployed, giving them an extra shield is sort of exponentially adds to the defensive ability of that ally. If you think about like someone like Drifter, for example, if they were to deploy that shield 2 persistent, giving them a shield 3, all of a sudden basically turns them pretty much invincible most of the time against small attacks, maybe from the imps, for example. So there is real value to do Zephyr Barrier, but most of the time I find the top half of Zephyr Barrier just good enough. I think this is just a running theme of Snowdancer's cards. You think, oh, the bottom half is so good, right? But then you think about, oh, actually, being able to repeatedly apply a ward to my allies, every rest cycle, 2 allies at a time, the amount of damage, let's say each of the ward absorbs 4 damage, you absorb 8 damage. If every rest cycle you can absorb 8 damage, and you don't even power with wind, you just get a heal 2, you're effectively increasing your allies' hit point by 10. Whereas, yes, this shield is valuable, but are you really going to absorb 10 damage worth of attack in a single rest cycle? So you can see it's almost comparable. Maybe this is slightly better, but this is more controlled. So overall, I find that this is running theme I'm talking about, right? Like the non-loss action is already amazing, so that your loss action comparatively it's okay. It's just slightly better, maybe. So if that's the case, I kind of prefer just doing this top half action over and over again rather than playing the loss here. So up against it is Biting Frost. Again, top half, ground ally, move 3, attack 6, with Frost attack 8. Wow, that's amazing. I think this top action is fantastic. If you have like a Drifter, for example, this would be attack 10, easily, move 3, attack 10. So Drifter can do like attack 4, attack 5, then you can make Drifter do another attack 10. Wow, I mean, that's gonna just do so much damage very, very quickly. It's pretty good. And if you have like Bling Blade, I think we talked about in the Bling Blade guide how great Bling Blade is at attacking. Like attack 8 with Bling Blade's deck is just going to be amazing. So Biting Frost, I have played with this card. The top half is fantastic. I think this is a card you probably take if your team demands more straightforward damage from you. You can take this and situationally use it at the 16 initiative to do those critical final hit on a particular enemy or on objective. The bottom half of Biting Frost is also fairly good. So the thing you probably want to do is you probably want to pair this with something like a Frigid Growth, right? So you can imagine you can open the game with at initiative 16, dropping a 1 hex hazardous terrain tile. Maybe maybe you guys are down here as a start, and the enemy is like over here ready to pounce you, right? And what you can do is you can open initiative 16, which will be good enough most of the time. Drop a 1, 2, 3 has this terrain like this. You can drop it into a featureless hex, and then you can immediately reposition yourself through a move 4, and all enemies occupying hazardous terrain gain immobilized. You can immediately immobilize one of these guys, and that's pretty good, right? So like taking 1/3 of the damage out from the first room, it's pretty amazing. And if there are other hazardous terrain already that you've placed previously, like later on you might have 2 guys here, then you can do this. But most of the time I find if you're taking this card, it basically represents a free immobilize on the very first round of a scenario, and that's often good enough. I wish this said all enemies adjacent to the hazardous terrain, but maybe that would be too powerful. But yeah, most of the time I find if I'm taking Biting Frost, I'm bringing it in the first rest cycle as a free immobilize for me to set up, and then later on it can critically become a huge hit through the top half of the card. But personally, I kind of prefer Zephyr Barrier. I just think Ward is so much more valuable, and for escorting missions, for the VIP, for whatever, for your Bone Shapers summons, you want to keep them alive, Zephyr Barrier is just amazing. Okay, on to level 5. Now I think level 5 is a real competition now. Shifting Snow, I think I talked about the bottom half already. Combine that with Cold Snap, you're going to have a brilliant time setting up the 3 hex hazardous terrain setup at a very decent initiative too. Top half of Shifting Snow is situationally useful. Sometimes you want to move your hazardous terrains. I mean, most of the time you just want to move the enemy rather than move your own terrain. But this is the real way of dealing with flying enemies now, right? If you have like a Living Spirit, you can move the hazardous terrains within range 4, which means it's very flexible, into them. You can only move them like adjacent to each other, so you can't move, like you can't relocate. So like if you're here and you have hazardous terrain here, you can't just relocate to the other side. They can only basically creep forward like some kind of snow drift. So you can move it that way, and if you move them into any figures, including allies, but most more likely there will be enemies, hopefully flying heavily shielded enemies, they will take the hazardous terrain damage, which will be typically 4 damage, and they gain muddle. So if you're really struggling on dealing with flying enemies, maybe this is where you do it. But most of the time I'm just deploying these 2 cards in conjunction with each other, either at initiative 17 or at initiative 86 to create this triple hex patterns. Whipping Gale. Now Whipping Gale, I've showcased the top half already as part of your combo. The other benefit of Whipping Gale is that fact that you get to target 3 enemies while you do it. It is only attack 1, but it means you get to draw 3 cards out of your wonderful modifier deck, and in particular the pull part of this means your rolling modifier, which forces enemies to move, works, so they can suffer additional damage. That's a bonus, but most of the time I'm looking for these heals, the ward, and the strengthen for my allies, and this is one of the cards I like very much to combine with this particular item called Eagle Eye Goggle. So Eagle Eye Goggle means during attack ability you gain advantage on all your attacks. So yeah, by doing this, I effectively get to draw 6 attack modifier cards out of my deck, and 6 out of an effective deck size of 20 means you get to see pretty much guaranteed a heal. So I often see this card as, hey, I will do a little bit of a very light attack, move some people through ice spikes, dealing probably like 4, 8, 12 damage, whatever that might be. Maybe I'll combo that to do even more damage, but more often than not, I'm going to combine that into basically like a heal of some kind. Almost I'm guaranteed to say, if I do this with a goggle, with a strengthened condition, I'm going to be healing my allies. So if you got poison, you got wound, you got brittle, hey, Whipping Gale is actually a healing card most of the time in those situations. Bottom half of Whipping Gale, I guess, is supposed to be comboing with Chilling Impact. So we can do top half Chilling Impact into bottom half of Whipping Gale. It is a 2 loss, but then with ice and wind every round, you get to push and pull enemy guaranteed, and you get to do 1 damage to them. That's it. Not much more to say there, guys. If I haven't convinced you that Chilling Impact is not the way to go yet for high difficulty level Snowdancer, I think that probably says it all. 2 lost card to do 1 damage every round to an enemy. Whatever, right? If you enjoy that, you enjoy that. I definitely don't. I mostly, if I'm taking Whipping Gale, I'm taking it for the top half action. Rarely, if ever, I am doing the bottom half action. Again, running theme. Your non-lost action is just so good, it outshines your lost action most of the time. So what do I do at level 5? I typically pick up one of these 2. Mostly I pick up Shifting Snow because I just like this combo so much. But then, as you will see with the level 6 cards, I often come back and pick up Whipping Gale as my level 6 level up card as well. Okay, level 6. So I think I talked about the summon of the polar card already. I would love to play more with this summon. I mean, this summon just looks so cool. It's definitely one of the coolest summon in the game. The Pier 3 is just so badass with the wound, right? But unfortunately, I'm sorry, Polar Cat. Most summoners are just not good enough on +3 difficulty. I think even Bone Shaper really struggles, to be honest. Any type of non-lost summon on +3 difficulty, it's just gonna have a hard time, and I think the Polar Cat is no different. Refreshing Flurry. In addition to being hard to say, a heal 4, range 4, bless. It's good, and granting the target of heal ability and move 3 is also good, but it is a top action. It's a top action. I think this is the problem I have with this. I'd much rather if this was like a heal 1, range 4, bless, grant target of the heal, move 3 on the bottom. You just got so many good top actions to do. I find that, I think there's one, was it one time I played, I thinking I'm going to play and try out the Polar Cat, but then immediately realized it's a mistake and I started using this more. Every time I use this action, I was kind of okay with it, but most of the time I just wished I did something else. I just wish I did maybe like Zephyr Barrier instead. You know, like, I guess this is why what I really mean by being your defensive ability has to be so efficient as outpacing the enemy's offensive ability. If it is just keeping par or going below it, what you're actually doing is giving the enemy the advantage by taking that top action. So Zephyr Barrier definitely for me is out efficiency against the enemy's monster movement and attacks, whereas Refreshing Flurry's top half doesn't quite do that for me. Like if heal 4 is just not good enough when enemies hitting you for like, you know, if you think about this, right, like I said, this is sometimes basically 10 hit points you're restoring to your team, whereas this is just 4 hit points. Yes, you're blessing, but your team might never draw that bless, then it's meaningless. Yes, you're moving somebody, but just moving somebody's not really good enough. I mean, if I could heal the enemy, if this said if this can be target enemy and ally, I would I would really like to have the ability to heal an enemy for 4, give them a bless, and then move them for 3, moving them through like 3 of these things, and they take like 12 that damage killing them. That's fine. Give the enemy the bless. I'll suffer the consequences later, but I would very much like to kill them. I wish that's how they designed this card, but alas, it wasn't how they designed this card, and therefore most of the time I'm not picking this card. Frozen Brand I think is a good card. It's a good card. So the move forward jump with ice is clearly, move forward for everybody. For most classes, move forward jump is just good enough. Generating a relevant element is obviously good. And then the top half, you know, if you have like, if you have a Blink Blade in your party, granting your Blink Blade a attack 4 push 2 in this crazy snowflakey pattern is just amazing. Even the Blink Blade catches like 4 enemies in this pattern, like 16 attack out of Blink Blade with push. I mean, you know that's gonna blow up the room, right? So if you have a good attacking class like Blink Blade, Drifter is not a good option for this because this is a melee attack and this will just eat up all of Drifter's charges. In fact, I think I tried this once with a Drifter ally and I asked them, do you want to do this? They're like, I do not want to do it because I'm going to run out all my Crushing Wave charges. Obviously, they don't have to do all the attacks, but then you're kind of wasting it, right? So if you have a good attacking class in your team, the Frozen Brand can often be used to blow up the room, but most of the time I find Frozen Brand is a bit of overkill. And again, this falls into the trap of, you know, you are spreading the damage, whereas I feel like with the push and pull combo, most of the time you are concentrating the damage, whereas this is kind of spreading damage. But nonetheless, Frozen Brand, if you have any class like Blink Blade in your party, this will be amazing, and yeah, you will get to bask in the glory with your ally as they blow up the room. So I think Frozen Brand is a real choice at level 6. You know, if you wanted to take Shifting Snow into Frozen Brand and you know, have less wind association and have this out of your deck and instead have this and use this most times to move forward jump, it's pretty good, I'm not gonna lie. But I just find like, for me, most of the time I want to use my Ice Spikes to do damage, and Whipping Gale is the card that does that for me. So Whipping Gale pairs so well with Shifting Snow, that pairs so well with Cold Snap. I find that these 3 cards just kind of coexist in the same continuum for me, whereas Frozen Brand doesn't quite do it. And this is how crazy the Snowdancer is, right? Like a move forward jump, generate ice, 33 initiative is just not good enough. So yeah, most of the time I'm picking these 3 cards. But I do want to mention that Frozen Brand is good in the sense that, as I said earlier, Snowdancer really needs good bottom half action because you have so many good top half actions like Whipping Gale, like Zephyr Barrier, like Cold Snap, right? So you kind of do want to have some good bottom actions, and if you're really struggling, Frozen Brand is a decent bottom action to pick up just at level 6. Okay, talking about good top half actions, here it is again, Storm War. Storm War is a great top half action. Again, mostly, not necessarily because of the attack is good, attack 2, I think the range 2 is quite restrictive, it's actually more restrictive and the pattern than you think it is. I think a lot of people look at this and think, wow, I mean, how hard it is to pull off this pattern. It's not hard, but then equally, to get the most out of it is often not that good, because a lot of the time, you know, like, think about this scenario where you can do this, a lot of the time your obstacle is going to be in front of the enemy, or sorry, in front of the enemy already, not behind enemy, because the way you set up your obstacle is you run up into the enemy, set it up, then you run back. So most of the time, if you're within range 2, you're probably facing more like this type of situation. So the pushing simply pushes them back from you. And, you know, it does mean that later on, they probably walk through this again, they will take damage, but the damage will not be immediate. You do need, if you want to get the full maximum damage out of that card, you do need to have some other class who's also helping you to set up damaging terrains, whether it's traps, whether it's hazardous terrains around behind enemy line, then you can push them into it. So yeah, trap is actually very good at doing that, and trap's your friend if you want to use a storm wall pushing part properly. The Pierce 2 is obviously much welcomed. Shielded enemies are really annoying on Frosthaven, and the shield 2, the Pierce 2 against the shield is more often than not very good. The all enemies adjacent to the red hexes of the attack ability suffers 1 is okay. Like I've already said with Chilling Impact, like 1 damage doesn't break the game that much. One thing to note is you pushed enemy into that area, this enemy doesn't take additional 1 damage. It has to be any enemy that's originally next to the attacking hexes that takes the damage. Just because you push the existing target into those spaces, it does not mean they take the extra damage. So yeah, Storm War I think it's just a great ability to have, but just similarly to Whipping Gale, right? If you use your goggle with this attack and you manage to get 3 targets in there, taking you through 6 of your attack modifier deck, drawing those heals, drawing those ward, drawing those strengthens, that's where this card really shines. The bottom half of Storm War I find is much better than the bottom half of Zephyr Barrier. I think why I said earlier you only have this card and these 2 attack modifier to grant ward, I lied. Storm War also grants you ward. Basically it says if you put it to an adjacent character's active area and treat it as if they owned it, they get to basically have ward on themselves. So unfortunately you can't do this to yourself because it has to be adjacent character's active area, but by putting this in front of your ally, you give them ward every single turn. It's pretty amazing. Combine that with any tanking class like Drifter, this will just grant so much more effective health to them. It means they can be very confident kicking down doors, running into the enemy, and just start hacking away. So I think Storm War, often than not, I'm playing for the top half, but there are definitely many occasions where I deliberately play into the bottom half. Probably not in the first rest cycle. Most of the time I try to heal through the first rest cycle, and in the second rest cycle I start deploying this, and it's very effective. Now, speaking of good actions, I think Freezing Storm is a fantastic bottom action. Move to create 1 hex hazardous terrain with ice. I did say earlier that I often find that most of the time I'm doing wind generation with my Wind Waker, my Snowdancer. So often I don't find ice to be as prevalent, but it's not hard to deliberately set up ice here, especially if you picked up Frozen Brand as your level 6 card. Unfortunate thing about this card is you can't do that on the first round. If this just created a 1 hex has terrain without the ice requirement, this could easily for me replace Shifting Snow, and I don't mind doing these 2 actions in conjunction late. So that unfortunately you can't do this on the very first round, but you can definitely do these 2 first and then do this as your retreating action, right? You can do this maybe paired into like Lifting Gust into some very heavy damage very quickly. So maybe your first round could be doing these 2 things, you know, create some, let's say you run up to like this, you create some hazardous, triple hazardous terrain hexes, and then you can quickly retreat with a move 2, and you have now, maybe let's say you're not here, maybe it's like that, and you've now moved back to here, and now you can use the ice and create more hazardous terrain hexes, and then you can pull enemy within range 3 for 2 straight into you. Maybe the scouts here, and you can put them in, and then you can do something like lifting gusts and push them all the way back out, right? They can take massive amount of damage that way. So I think every time I play with Freezing Storm over Storm Wall, I've never really regretted it, because Freezing Storm just represents so much effective damage. Even if you're not creating hazardous terrain hexes, just a pull 2 or range 3 is just often good enough, to be honest. The only reason often I take Storm Wall over Freezing Storm is Storm Wall at higher levels basically represents healing as well. So like I said, Whipping Gale is like secretly a healing card, so is Storm Wall. Storm Wall is secretly a healing card, because by targeting a lot of people, you draw attack modifiers, and then you get to heal. Whereas Storm Wall, I mean, the top half I guess is kind of similar, but it's a lost card, right? It's not a non-lost card. But yeah, I think at level 7 you have a real choice here. Both cards are super valid. It just depends on your playstyle. Not much to say about the top half of Freezing Storm. I mean, it's just clearly good, right? If you definitely want to play with wind, the damage for attack always in range 3. You're probably most often catching 4 to 5 targets here, and that means you're going to get some healing out of it as well. I mean, just good. There's just not much more to say about it. Both of these cards are good. It just depends on what you want to do, and I tend to lean slightly more towards the defensive style, more of the manipulation movement style, and a bit of the secret healing. I guess more persistently sustain the type of Snowdancer that I perform. I prefer Storm Wall, and maybe I just like wind better than ice. Okay, level 8. Level 8 is really interesting. Surging Below, for me, is effectively a better Lifting Gust. So if you're taking Surging Below here, right, attack 3, range 2, push 2, attack 3, range 4, push 2. You can be, of course, attacking the same target here. That would be a push 4. That's effectively a better Lifting Gust most of the time. The only difference is, if the enemy is precisely at range 3 to start off with, then you don't get the first attack off. Then this just becomes attack 3, range 4, push 2. Then maybe Lifting Gust with the push 4 slightly better. But yeah, most of the time, Surging Below for me just exactly replaces Lifting Gust, and that's fine. The bottom half is of course a fine action, although most of the time at this level I'm using Surging Below for the top attack, because by attacking twice, again, I get to see more of my attack modifier. Having said that, Endless White is Initiative 5 card, so that alone deserves some attention paid to the Endless White. So Initiative 5, move 6, generate a wind, clearly is very good, especially in a class that's struggling with lower card actions. So if you're taking the Endless White at level 8, I think there's a very good reason to do so, purely for the initiative and for the movement. The top half of the action, though, is very interesting. I think a lot of people are not very excited about the top half of Endless White. It's kind of weird because you're reducing all range abilities this round, not just your own, not just your enemies, but your allies as well. If you have any allies that has any range abilities, their range abilities gets reduced. So that alone makes this card quite hard to pull off, I think. If you're playing with like and I guess the funny thing is, I think this doesn't impact Geminate, because Geminate's range cannot be modified. It doesn't really impact Deathwalker, because Deathwalker has either infinite range in some of the attacks, or it just attacks from shadows, which is not a range attack. It will definitely affect your range Banner Spear, for example. So yeah, if you're in a 4-player party, you gotta be quite careful about when you take this, when you don't take this. And if you are taking this when you play it, then you better communicate in advance with your party, because cutting everybody's range ability by 1 can be quite damaging. And especially most of the time when you want to play this, you probably want to power it with ice and wind and reduce all range abilities by 2. And you think, okay, I've done all of that. So what? So I've done that initiative 5, so what? Everybody, let's say it doesn't even impact your party because all your parties are melee attackers, but so what? What does that actually do? I think one thing it definitely does is it helps you deal with some of the more crazy ranged static enemies in the game. Think about Ancient Artillery, for example. Think about Ancient Horror, for example. These guys do long range attacks and they don't move, and they're often positioned in quite annoying choke points on the map. So that you either have to run through a line of gunpowder fire to get to them, or you have to like slowly trudge up to them by cutting down the Algox guards standing in front of them while they keep firing away at you from the back line, right? Those are really annoying, and the Endless White solves that problem for you. Assuming you can power Ice and Wind, reducing 2 range on these guys often means they're no longer attacking for that round. If you can disable like 4 cannons at the back, that's amazing. And if you drink this back again and you can do it again, that's amazing. You basically disabled like 4 high-powered cannons in the back of the room for 2 rounds in a row with a simple drink of stamina potion. But of course the downside is you must be able to power Ice and Wind together, and that's hard because often your bottom action only powers one of the 2 elements you need, right? Like think about Frozen Brand or Shifting Snow, or I guess Nature's Breath. It's only going to give you Ice or Wind, so you're going to need some help from your allies or from some items, potentially like Circulative Element, to help you generate the second element to keep the Endless White up. But if you can keep it up, and I would encourage you to think of it in the context of Blinding Flurries, because I think thematically that's how it should work, right? On the very first round, you clearly do not have these 2 elements, but those cannons are muddled. On the second round, you can do this and disable those cannons effectively, and then maybe if you drink back this card again, on the third round you can do it again. So there's actually a great, interesting combo you can do that you can disable these more scary static range enemies multiple rounds in a row by virtue of having this card. So I have taken the Endless White before, I have used it. It does require a bit of setup, a bit of communication with your team, but when you can do that, super effective. It's actually more effective than you think it is in your head. I think a lot of people don't really value the Endless White because it is not a damage card. It is not a defensive healing warding type of card. Like reducing range feels weird, and what am I doing with this? Yes, in some scenarios this will do nothing, but even in those scenarios it is an initiative 5 move 6, so hey, it's not nothing, right? And you don't have to take it into every scenario. Take it into the ones that you think is going to be more impactful and use it and try it out and tell your teammate that you're going to use it, and it could be more effective than you think it is. Okay, level 9. Now level 9, I love the Snowdancer level 9 cards. I mean, there's just no competition here. It's almost like we had several rounds of like, hey, what am I picking? How good are these cards? Yes, some of them are good, some of them are weird. But level 9, both cards are just amazing. I wish I could pick both. Maybe that's how they've designed all of the classes level 9 cards, right? You're just like, I want to pick both. Both of them sound super fun. I want to play with both. Let's start with Snowblind. Now, Snowblind, I think, is one of the best disarm attack in the whole game, because, attack 3, targeting 2 enemies at range 5 is pretty good, and you get to disarm them. Amazing. Just so good. And yes, the condition is kind of weird. They need to be occupying or adjacent to the same hazardous terrain tile, but that's not hard for you to do because you have plenty of bottom action, well, plenty, Shifting Snow mainly, to set up a hazardous terrain into adjacent featureless hex. So very common once I get to level 9 if I'm picking Snowblind, right? My first opening move is very simply, like if you have 2 enemies standing something like this, they don't even need to be next to each other. You can just run up at initiative 17, drop this, attack these guys with disadvantage. That's fine, I don't care. It's not about the damage, it's about the disarm. And then I just disarm these 2 guys. Then I can drink my major stamina potion, which by the way is a favorite potion of mine for the Snowdancer. I just drink that, and then now I just get to run out next round fast with any card, do the same attack again, disarming 4 enemies, 2 enemies 2 rounds in a row there. Snowblind, so good. And the fact that you get to draw 2 attack modifier deck out of your wonderful attack modifier deck where you can strengthen and healing and ward people. It's just amazing. As a result, I rarely ever play Snowblind for the bottom half. It says whenever you or ally perform a rest, whether long rest or short rest, the resting characters, unfortunately it doesn't apply to summons, it's just the resting characters can get a bless. It does mean your team, the 10 bless cards will be basically all drawn if you deploy this early. But hey, maybe I will play this in a short scenario where we need to kill a boss and that really works, but most of the time I find Snowblind is just so fantastic. Once again, the normal non-loss actions outpowering the loss action such that I don't even consider this to be a good action. Yeah, Snowblind, fantastic. What a great card, and nothing else to say about it. Unfortunately, Snowblind's up against Winds of Change. Winds of Change is also amazing. And once again, it's amazing because of the bottom action. So Winds of Change bottom side says, move 2, heal 4, range 3. Now that's amazing, obviously. But the target with the heal ability may lose a card from their hand or discard pile to recover 1 card from their lost pile of level equal to or lower than the lost card. So if you think about what that means, is you're basically exchanging 1 card from your hand or discard pile for 1 card from your lost pile. But the most important thing is you get to pick that card up directly into your hand, add it to your current hand. So if you have an odd hand size, like you have level 7 right now, not odd hand size, odd number of cards in your hand. Let's say you have level 7, let's say you have 7 cards in your hand right now, and if you will keep playing, you get to play 3 more rounds, right? But you can lose a card from the discard pile, pick up a card of equal or lower level from your lost pile, and now you have 8 cards in your hand, which means you get to play an extra round. Now that is huge. That basically works like a stamina potion, or maybe half a stamina potion effectively. So this is where the power of Winds of Change really come in. If you're playing with like a Deathwalker or a Geminate, Geminate is a very good example. I've played with Geminate before, and Winds of Change is a huge boost for Geminate because Geminate likes to play a lost card, and this helps them even out their hand to give them extra rounds, and is pretty amazing. So I think the way you think about Winds of Change is kind of like a healing potion and the stamina potion combined, and that in itself should tell you how good the bottom half of Winds of Change is. So yeah, if you want to play a more longevity-driven Snowdancer, bottom half of Winds of Change is basically what you're going for. And if you want to play the most amazing, satisfying disarm ability in the game, then Snowblind is probably what you're going for here. Winds of Change, top half, clearly is amazing. Attack 4, target 4, range 4. I don't know why 4, 4, 4, but there it is. And you get to control all targets with attack ability to move 2, and you generate wind, and you have initiative 15. So I mean, it has it all, right? I don't think there's a right or wrong answer at level 9. I think some of the earlier levels, like level 2, I probably definitely pick Birdie and Tempest. Level 3, I probably definitely pick Cold Snap. I think level 4, most of the time, I'm probably picking Zephyr Barrier. Level 5, I think, probably Shifting Snow if you're not going to be taking Whipping Gale. Level 6, if you really want to pick a level 6 card, I'd probably pick Frozen Brand. I think level 7 you have a real contender, level 8 you have a real contender, and level 9, boy do you have a nail-biting contender. But I think that's the amazing thing about the Snowdancer. Snowdancer has a lot of really interesting cards, a lot of very good support defensive cards, and yeah, the regular actions I find is just better than the persistent. That most of the time I don't want to be playing the persistent bonuses, I just want to play my good actions over and over again. So here are all the cards. Let's talk briefly about perks. Your perk is, I think I've talked about it mostly already. Let's look at your attack modifier deck. You have 26 attack modifier deck once you've fully leveled up and ticked every single perk. And it is possible now, if this clearly is going to be your 2nd generation character, so you do have at least 1 perk heritage, so you can probably get to a point where you can add all of these cards into your deck, and once you've done that, you have a 26 card deck with 6 rollings. These rollings are clearly really good. And then you have some other rollings, like if this action forces target to move, it suffers 1 damage. I'm not really relying on drawing these. If it happens, it's good. I find more often than not, I end up drawing like 2 or 3 of these in a row on an attack action where I'm not pushing or pulling enemies. Then I get really sad, but I'm not relying on these, but they're good to have. Why not, right? But I think the most important thing to note is you take out all of your -1s. And I think most of the time that's what I go first. I start with these to replace them with a +1 ally heal and a +0 damage card, and then I take these out. I'm not relying on drawing Immobilize. If it happens, it happens. But I just like to remove all the -1s so that my attack modifier deck becomes pretty consistent. Even on attack 1s, I know most of the time I'm doing 1 damage, which is good. The next set I like to add is these. I think these are super valuable. The ward is so good on higher level difficulties, and I'm happy whenever I draw these. I never feel sad about this. The next set I take out, now I think now it really depends. If you find that you're struggling to generate element, adding these +1s are quite good. They can power your next rounds of wind ice. I think especially if you're playing like, if you're really insisting on playing Chilling Impact, that's probably where I will focus on getting these into your deck, just so you can generate an ice. Because I find generally ice is harder to generate in the way I play. Like, you do get to generate ice through these, but if you're playing this first, then you have to definitely pair with some kind of bottom movement to generate ice right off the get-go, and then thereafter it's quite, if you want to be doing a push and pulling attack every single round, like Lifting Gust is generating wind, Surging Below generates wind. I feel like probably it's because most of your push and pulling cards that has an element generation on it, they're all wind, so that to generate ice you kind of have to go out of your way to generate ice for Chilling Impact. So if you're feeding Chilling Impact all the time, I think you probably want to pick up these next, just so you have more likelihood when you do your push and pulling attacks that you are generating the ice for the next round to feed into Chilling Impact. If you're not playing to Chilling Impact, which I don't advocate you to do, and most of the time I don't myself, I start to get rid of these +0s. I get a Strengthen first, because I find, again, joining a higher level team, feeding Strengthen to your ally here and there can be quite useful, although you don't often find the timing works out exactly. But hey, it is a +1 damage at the end of the day, right? So it's nothing to write home about if you miss a Strengthening, but the +1 damage is definitely welcome. And then getting rid of the zeros for the rollers, it effectively reduces your deck size, which is great. And if this happens, if you manage to do it, it's great. If you don't manage to do it, it's okay. You roll into the next card and you move on. I think it's worth noting that if you are halfway through your deck, you haven't seen any of these yet, it's time to start paying a little bit of attention that you want to start doing your push and pulling attacks into enemies that you can actually move, because sometimes they're kind of stuck in a corner or something, you can't move them, because you might be drawing 2 or 3 of these at a time, and that's like 3 damage you don't want to be foregoing. But overall, your attack modifier deck is very consistent. Once you are fully leveled up in your attack modifier deck, you only have 1 and 2 negative card, the natural miss and the -2. The -2 will appear and is annoying, but most of the time you're not relying, like I said in my build, you're not relying on your attack modifier deck to do damage, so it's not the end of the world if you draw it. Coming on to your 3 non-attack modifier perks, Heart of the Storm is basically what I pick up first. With this, you effectively have got rid of your elemental requirement, because every time you long rest, you get to generate element. Of course, most of the time when you play cards, you generate element naturally, and with Heart of the Storm, you can ensure that after your long rest, you start with a full grip of cards and a relevant element up and running. So Heart of the Storm is only a single tick, and is often the first thing I get when I take my Snowdancer. Blinding Flurries I talked about already. It represents quite a lot of damage mitigation, especially if you have people who can curse in your party. And the only downside to this is, well, maybe 2 downsides. One is a 2-tick perk. The other thing is I forget about it all the time. So if you are getting Blinding Flurries, make sure you put that next to the room where you're going to open a door, so that you don't forget to do that. But it is a fantastic perk, and It's not a perk I typically prioritize over improving my attack modifier deck, but I will definitely squeeze it in, especially once I've got all the healings and the strengthening out of the way. I can now fish for these cards as I attack. Now I start to think about getting my Blinding Flurries online. Finally, Winter's Breath. Now, Winter's Breath, if it was 1 tick, I'd probably be more inclined to pick it early. Winter's Breath being 2 tick, I just feel like I'd rather have like these in my deck where I can naturally draw into them than have this. Because short resting is not good for Snowdancer in general because of Heart of the Storm. I guess the only thing to say is when you do short rest is when things get really bad, right? That's typically when your team does need a short rest. And you are a good short rest candidate. And if you have Winter's Breath, right, if things are going really, really bad, you can apply Ward on somebody. That's often quite helpful and it's quite critical to saving a teammate. So I think Winter's Breath is a great perk to pick up. It's just not something I prioritize, but it does have synergy with the situations where you need to be short resting. Okay, finally, let's talk about Masteries and items, then we can close this analysis for today. Masteries, cause at least one ally or enemy to move each round. I don't think that's difficult. Just pick a short scenario and you're good to go. Just make sure somebody moves every round. You have plenty of ways to do that. I don't think this is difficult. Yeah, you should definitely be trying to grab that early. Second one, ensure the first ally to suffer damage each round directly before suffering the damage has at least one condition you applied. That sounds hard on paper because it sounds like, oh, I gotta ward or regen somebody before they take damage each round, have to do it every single round, so it's difficult. It is difficult, especially if you're in a scenario where you gotta be fighting a lot of people. But if you're playing a short scenario, you can just ask your allies to pitch card. So instead of suffering damage, you can just not suffer the damage by throwing the card. So yeah, if all your allies are happy to do that, and it's just a short scenario, and maybe like survive 7 rounds, I don't know, and you can definitely survive long enough because hey, you're a Snowdancer, you can keep people alive. Just every time they need to suffer damage, if they haven't got a condition that you've applied yet, throw a card. Then they don't suffer the damage. Then that's fine. So I think this Mastery is easier to do than you think. Both of them, just pick a short scenario so you don't tank your team deliberately, and then yeah. Tell your team you're going to do it and work with them, and it shouldn't be too difficult. The solo scenario, however, is extremely difficult. I've attempted it before on +3 multiple times, each time a failure. I've never beaten on +3, so I don't know how to do it. If anybody knows how to beat it on +3, I would love to hear your strategy. I've tried many different things with Snowdancer. It just feels impossible. The reward is definitely worth it. I think the solo item is definitely good. I'm not going to spoil it here, but it's definitely worth it. I just don't know how to do it on +3, so please, if anybody knows, please educate me. Okay, finally items. So, starting items, I like to take Circular Element. This basically helps solve your wind and ice generation problems for 25 gold. It's pretty good. Weighted Net I talked about, it's just great. A lot of your attack abilities are ranged, and adding Immobilize onto your attack is just fantastic. I don't think I need to say much more about that. And of course, Leather Armor. As I said earlier, one of the biggest problems on +3 difficulty is getting critted in the face. So having Leather Armor on earlier means that you're less likely to be critted. And most of the time, your Snowdancer, even at a lower level, should be taking 1 hit every rest cycle just to ease the burden for the tank on the team. And yeah, Leather Armor helps you to do that safely. Later on, my Leather Armor gets upgraded to Cure Leather Armor, of course. My Weighted Net, if I feel like I no longer need to do Immobilize because the team has plenty of Disable already. Energizing Baton is a great item to pick up for a single hand slot. It says whenever you apply positive condition on ally, a different ally within range 3 gains the same condition. That basically turns your Zephyr Barrier into a 3 ward play every time you do this, and it's just amazing. Like, imagine warding basically your entire party every single time with energizing Baton in play. I mean, it's just amazing, right? What else can I say about this? Of course, this applies to Regenerate as well. It applies to Bless as well. But yeah, mostly I'm doing it for the ward, and you can even use it when you draw this rolling modifier, like accidentally attack you can attack somebody in the hope of drawing out a ward thing, and then now you're warding 2 allies at the same time. hey, energizing baton. I feel like it's just designed for our Snowdancer here. And then finally, Eagle Eye Goggle. I talked about this already. This just helps you get to your healing and warding attack modifier damage quicker. And it's just fantastic. And all of these items synergize well with the fact that you want a long rest. And you have Heart of the Storm to help you with long resting. And then finally, Major Stamina Potion, I think deserves a mention here. When you get to the higher levels, being able to recycle like Snowblind or Surging Below or Storm Wall, or even Shifting Snow, which is great. There are so many things you can do with this, and Major Stamina Potion is a very strong, you only get 2 in the party, but very strong competition for you as a Snowdancer. And maybe the final item I like to mention, maybe it's slightly less on the radar for people, is actually the flexible slippers. Because you're putting so much hazardous terrain out, very often you'll find there's a single spot where all enemies come to die. And this spot will have loads of loot pouches. So yeah, I think flexible slippers definitely deserves a mention. For single hide, I mean, you don't need to move that much. You're pretty static, and you get to kill a lot of enemy here, and you get to loot this when you have stacked up enough. So why not, eh? Why not? You could help the team recover those otherwise lost pouches on the spikes with flexible slippers. Okay, so here it is. Here's my thought on the Snowdancer. As usual, if you enjoy that, please let me know what you think on the comment. I would love to hear your thoughts, your impression, and your experiences playing with a Snowdancer. In my view, Snowdancer is a defensive, supportive type of character, and is unique in that sense, and therefore you should play it to its strengths. So why not? Ignore your Polo Cat, leave your Snow Fox at home, and don't bring your White Owl to school today. Focus on making your team the best they can be and putting spikes everywhere. So there it is. Enjoy Snowdancing, or wind waking as I like to think. Goodbye.